my name is Mark Bazayan. I am a Principal Environment Specialist at the Asian Development Bank and have the privilege to help bring this event together. Just a very few brief housekeeping points for all of us. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off your microphone and your video unless speaking. This will help us save on bandwidth so we have a smooth connection. In terms of comments and questions, we encourage everyone to please use the chat box function down at the bottom of the screen rather than the hand raise function. We will encourage people to do that throughout the session because it will be helpful for our 30-minute Q&A session at the end. And finally, this was a new function for me in Zoom, but if you wish to switch to speaker view, you have that option in the top right corner of your screen where it says view. If you wish only to see the speaker rather than the whole panel mosaic that I'm looking at right now, then you can just toggle that up in the corner there, speaker view or gallery view. So with that, I will hand over please to Mr. Qingfeng Zhang, my director and the Director of Environment, Natural Resources and Agriculture of ADB's East Asia Department, and Qingfeng will be moderating the opening remarks and the session one. Thank you very much. Qingfeng, over to you, and wishing everyone a fantastic webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark and the team. Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar on the East Asia and the Australasia Flyway, opportunities to support wetlands, livelihoods, and biodiversity in East Asia and the Southeast Asia region. This webinar is jointly hosted by the Asian Development Bank, ADB, the East Asia-Australasia Flyway Partnership, EAAFP, the Center for East Asia and Australasia Flyway Studies, and also BirdLife International. It is now my pleasure to begin the opening session by introducing Jim Leach, Director General for East Asia Department in ADB. DG James manages ADB sovereign operations in the PRC and also Mongolia. He is a key champion in the Bank for Green Recovery and the Natural Capital Investment. DG James, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jinfeng, and thank you, Mark. I notice we have over 90 participants joining us, so let me begin. Distinguished guests and ADB colleagues, on behalf of the Asian Development Bank, I extend a warm welcome to all of our speakers and participants from the Asia-Pacific region, the United States, Canada, and Europe, and I'm also very impressed to see many representatives from governments and civil society organizations and development agencies from across the world. This webinar has been jointly prepared and is co-hosted with the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership Secretariat, and they are based up in Seoul. The Center for East Asian-Australasian Flyway Studies, based at the Beijing Forestry University, and BirdLife International, headquartered in Cambridge, the United Kingdom. And I sincerely thank all of our co-hosts for their great collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's fair to say that the outbreak and global reach of the COVID-19 pandemic has increased everyone's awareness of the delicate relationship between nature and human health and well-being. Looking ahead, we have an opportunity to build on this awareness and contribute to the global momentum for a green economic recovery. For ADB, this includes an increased effort to incorporate biodiversity conservation and at the same time support livelihoods for greener and a more sustainable future. Asia's wetlands supports global diversity and critical ecosystems that millions of people depend on. Yet this fragile balance between the natural environment and people is under considerable stress. So to help protect wetlands, wildlife, and all of us who depend on healthy ecosystems, today's webinar provides an opportunity to bring together governments, civil society organizations, and development agencies to find multi-sectoral, collaborative, and sustainable solutions. For the People's Republic of China, I'm pleased to say that ADB's support for wetland conservation is growing, and this reflects the government's commitment to conservation and the need to protect wetlands, as well as the species and people that depend on them. Over the last 15 years, ADB has supported around 15 loan and grant funded projects in 11 provinces across the PRC. And these projects have included wetland management and a whole other range of activities. Some examples include the Jiangsu Yancheng wetlands, the Sanjiang Plains wetlands, and the Baiyangdian Lake. Environmental degradation clearly comes with huge costs, but we are learning that ecological products and services are incredibly valuable and worth protecting. So in partnership with Stanford University, ADB is also exploring the possibility of establishing a natural capital lab in China to improve the inventory and valuation of natural resources in order to promote payments for ecological services, such as through eco-compensation schemes. So to scale up our operations in these areas, we recognize the urgent need to further strengthen our partnerships for wetlands and biodiversity conservation across the Asia region. So this really brings me to the objective of today's webinar, which is to introduce and facilitate preliminary discussions on our proposed regional flyway program for wetlands, biodiversity, and livelihoods in East and Southeast Asia. We hope that this new program can be launched with our partners at the 15th Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity, which will be held and hosted in China next year in May 2021. So to achieve this goal, we will need your support, inputs, and collaboration, especially over the next 6 months in the lead up to COP15. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. And a special thanks goes to the project team who worked tirelessly to organize this webinar and to bring us all together from across the globe. So I really look forward to this afternoon's discussion, and I hope that our webinar marks a new beginning in our joint efforts to support wetlands, livelihoods, and biodiversity in East and Southeast Asia. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jim Leach. Jim just introduced East Asia perspective on how to support the new proposed regional program. So let me now invite our second speaker, DG Ramesh, Director General for the Southeast Asia Department. DG Ramesh is a key champion in the Bank for Regional Cooperation and Green Financing. No doubt to say there is a great potential to replicate the regional program in the Southeast Asia region. DG Ramesh, floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Cheng Feng. Ladies and gentlemen, respected colleagues, it's actually very nice to see a lot of you participating in this, and including, I did not realize that there are colleagues joining from Canada and the US, where it's 2 a.m. at least. So thank you so much for your interest, and it's great to collaborate with BirdLife International as well as a number of other institutions, and also nice to have Patricia Zurita in this as well as others. Jim Lynch already had a warm welcome, and I want to echo what he said. And Jim also focused on how the COVID-19 pandemic has brought out very clearly the relationship between nature and people. I was also thinking the other flip side. I live right in the middle of Makati. If I look outside of my window, lots of tall buildings, but also in the morning, I'm able to see birds I've never seen ever in the last 25 years in Manila, with beautiful colors. All of what we are seeing reminds us all of the consequences to our own well-being and survival that can result from continued biodiversity loss, as well as, I suppose, biodiversity gains. The fifth Global Biodiversity Outlook that was launched just very recently last month also sadly highlighted that none of the Aichi biodiversity targets will be fully met in 2020. This in turn will threaten the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and could also undermine our collective efforts to address climate change. Jim talked about natural ecosystems. They obviously, needless to say for this audience, serve as a provider of, or a critical provider of regional public goods, including critical ecosystem services that underpin among others, regional food security, which is also being tested by the COVID-19 pandemic. While the role of all the parties involved are critical in managing natural resources within a particular area, strong and effective regional cooperation is no doubt critical for managing regional public goods. In Southeast Asia, supporting regional cooperation and integration, or RCI for short, for sustainable economic development has been a core component of ADB and ADB supported programs over the years. Many of you would be aware of the Greater Mekong Sub-Region Initiative, GMS for short, as well as other regional cooperation initiatives such as the IMTGT, that is Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle, and BIMP IAGA, or Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East ASEAN Growth Area. ADB, we are very happy and privileged to have had a close partnership with these initiatives and the continued support that we've been able to provide for these initiatives. Sustainable environmental and biodiversity management and strengthening resilience to climate change are integral components of these initiatives, as well as ASEAN at a broader level. The GMS Biodiversity Conservation Corridors Initiative, for instance, focuses on conservation and management of transboundary landscapes in the GMS region. The associated national level projects in these landscapes have been implemented for several phases over a decade in Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Vietnam. The types of support provided range from policy, for example, strategic plans for protected areas, site level support, for example, coastal wetlands restoration in Kokang province in Cambodia, for instance, to capacity building, knowledge sharing and dissemination, and most importantly, in many cases, direct livelihood support initiatives. The Coral Triangle Initiative, which is another ecosystem and biodiversity initiative, worth mentioning, includes Indonesia, Malaysia, PNG or Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Solomon Islands, as well as Timor-Leste. Often referred to as the Amazon of the seas, the Coral Triangle has 76% of all known coral species, 37% of all known coral reef fish species, 53% of the world's coral reefs, and about 3,000 species of reef fish, and the greatest extent of mangrove forests in the world. And these serve as the spawning and juvenile growth areas for the world's largest and most valuable tuna fishery. For the CTI, ADB was requested to serve as the lead JEF agency to organize a program of international technical and financial support. ADB also has directly implemented several projects in participating countries under the CTI's program of action on coastal and marine resource management in Southeast Asia and beyond in the Pacific. We are here today at this juncture with so much uncertainty of when and if there will be ever the same normal again. We're all fairly certain of being in a new normal already. Is this pandemic just the start of many more in the future? Hopefully not very soon, but certainly we should be prepared. The COVID-19 pandemic, needless to say, serves as a stark reminder of how vulnerable we become when natural ecosystems that we depend on are stressed beyond their tipping point. But we are also slowly emerging from the COVID-19 crisis. And as we do so, the region is looking for hope for a better and greener future. The proposed Flyway program that we will be discussing at this forum is another potential tool for sustainable management of the network of coastal wetlands and ensuring ecosystems connectivity in East and Southeast Asia. And to ensure success, partnership is very critical as we complement each other's expertise and resources. We sincerely believe this forum and the proposed Flyway, wetland conservation and the Livelihoods program has the potential to provide an excellent start to much longer term networking and consultations with all of you as key experts, participating institutions, as well as the developing members of ADB. From a Southeast Asia perspective, we would certainly like to propose we consider discussing and exploring cooperation with the various ADB supported regional cooperation platforms that I mentioned, such as the GMS, the IMTGT, and the BIMPIAGA. On behalf of ADB, sincere thanks to, again, all the speakers, the participants, the participating institutions, as well as our own colleagues who've been working tirelessly for preparation of this webinar. Would like to particularly thank the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Secretariat for all your fantastic support in co-organizing this event. Thank you so much for patiently listening to me. Over to you, Chengfeng.
Thank you so much, DG Ramesh. Very exciting to hear Southeast Asia has such a great potential. And also DG Ramesh just highlight importance of natural capital, and also importance of highlights the partnership with one of the key regional platform already. So let me now turn to our third speaker, also very important speaker, Madam Patricia Ureta. She is a Chief Executive Official for BirdLife International. She is also a very instrumental to initiating some of the key important regional program already. And particularly for this regional program, she is also a champion. Now, BirdLife International is the world's largest natural conservation partnership, and also play a very important role for elevating the importance of the Jiangsu Yancheng project. Now, let's turn the floor to Patricia. Dr. Patricia, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chengfeng, and thank you to all of you and the team at the ADB who had put this together. Let me just share very quickly my screen so you guys can see this. But thank you to Jim and Ramesh for your great words in terms of the importance of reconnecting with nature and the opportunity that we have right now. As you heard, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Patricia Zurita. I'm the Chief Executive of BirdLife International. What I wanted to talk to you about today was how much do we have this incredible opportunity to use conservation and restoration of sites and wetlands as a huge opportunity for a new beginning, and how the East Asian-Australasian Flyway can be an extraordinary model for the future, and how all of us together and with the leadership of the Asian Development Bank, we can make it happen. The migration of birds has been a phenomenon that has awed and amazed people over the world and over the centuries. Here we have soaring birds crossing from Africa to Europe and Asia using the thermals. And has been a spectacle that people have been looking at all over the world and throughout the years. But it's not only the big birds that actually migrate. In my side of the world, and Warren may remember this, we have the ruby-throated hummingbird, and you can see in the photo on the right how tiny they are. And they migrate from Central America, crossing the Gulf of Mexico, all throughout to the United States and Canada. And the migration makes the news. We just heard last week how a bar-tailed godwit that has been satellite tagged broke the record for the longest non-stop flight coming from Alaska to New Zealand in 11 days, crossing over 12,000 kilometers. The problem is that the migration is a risky journey, not only because how demanding it is in terms of energy for these birds, but how difficult we are making it to them. The loss and degradation of wetlands, coastal wetlands because of development, the unsustainable land use that we are having in our landscapes, the energy infrastructure that we're planting is creating collisions and electrocution. And the reality is that the migration is just a mirror of what's happening with nature at large. Nature is at risk, and some of you may have heard about the Living Index that WWF published, showing that in the last 50 years, 68% of the wildlife populations have actually plummeted. I was astonished to hear that 90% of the wetlands have disappeared. in the last 3 centuries, 90%. In 2019, we lost almost 12 million hectares of tropical forest, and this is only tropical forest, which means a football pitch every 6 seconds throughout the year, every 6 seconds. We have, and you heard it from Ramesh, we have failed to meet all of the Aichi biodiversity targets that were set by the Convention of Biological Diversity parties in 2010 in Nagoya. Now, I don't want this to be the doom and gloom that the conservation community normally presents, but you have to remember that when nature is at risk, humanity goes with it as well. That said, there is hope. And I just wanted to show you one of the many graphics of our publication that was launched 2 weeks ago, The State of the Waterbirds, where we actually show that when we give nature a chance, it actually comes back. And this is just one example from the United States when the Conservation Reserve Program was introduced in 1985, and the addition of the wetland easement in the Farm Bill and then the grassland easement in the Farm Bill, the impact that it actually had on birds. And wetland birds, not only, we were not only able to stabilize the population, but we started bringing them back. And for birds like the grassland birds, we are starting to stabilize the populations thanks to initiatives that started with the government and incentives that enable local land users to make nature work at the same time that they are being able to have an income and a livelihood. So going back to what Jim said on the Natural Capital Initiative in Stanford, it's fantastic to hear that because these type of incentives are possible and we've seen them work. So conservation does work. We need to make it happen more. And the East Asian-Australasian Flyway is an absolute magnificent place to test it. It is the largest migratory bird corridor on Earth, but it's also a flyway that is over the most densely populated areas with large centers of human population and megacities in large-scale development. It's also the most threatened migratory flyway, with 61 species of migratory birds, either on the vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered category, and over 20 species of wetland and waterbirds critically endangered. So it is a space where we need to make a difference and where we could, if we work together. And it's incredibly encouraging to see the leadership, not only the leadership that we're seeing today, thanks to the Asian Development Bank bringing us all together, but what we have seen over the last couple of years with the government of the Republic of China, of the People's Republic of China, showcasing the leadership of stopping the reclamation of the wetlands in the Yellow Sea, but then going forward into the inscription of the Yellow Sea and Bohai Bay wetlands in phase 1 of the World Heritage Site. This is a picture that we took in Baku when we were supporting the process of the inscription of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And we know for fact, that a green recovery is possible. Ramesh said it, Jim mentioned it. We can use this as an extraordinary opportunity to restoring our relationship with nature and using the restoration and protection of sites as an opportunity to create jobs, to empower local communities, to generate sustainable income, to produce and establish green infrastructure for climate adaptation and protect unique biodiversity. We can make it happen. We believe it is possible. And we heard from President Xi at the UN General Assembly this past month that he was mentioning that we can achieve a win-win in both ecological conservation and high quality development, but that can only happen if we work together. So would we give it a chance? I couldn't avoid putting a wonderful picture of the symbol of the East Asian-Australasian Flyway, the spoonbill sandpiper. And I can only tell you and close by saying that the BirdLife family is standing here ready to help. We know how collaboration works and we're ready to tend our hands not only with our family, but beyond to ensure that the East Asian-Australasian Flyway is protected, that we get people a chance and that we can use this opportunity to restore our relationship with nature. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much, Patricia. With your very inspiring presentation and also the opening speech from the two DGs, the team I fully confident we are ready to move ahead this regional program. So let me move to the session one. In the session one, we have the 3 speakers. Each of them will present their key points in 10 minutes. Let me first invite our first speaker, Mr. Dr. Watkins, the Chief Executive Official, EAAFP Secretariat Office. Mr. Dr. Watkins has worked extensively on migratory waterbird conservation since 1995. Today, he will discuss the challenges and the opportunities for waterbird and wetland conservation. Mr. Doug Wicks, floor is yours.
Feng, and to everyone, my apology just to quickly step in at the risk of being the bad guy. Just a gentle reminder to everyone as an event coordinator to please stay on time with your presentations. We're running 10 minutes over, and I know that's just going to have a knock-on effect for everyone as we get later into the webinar. So thank you very much, everyone, for staying on time. Thank you.
My screen, how do I show my screen?
We can see you, Doug.
Okay, but can you see my screen?
No, we can see you though. Please click on the green tab at the bottom. Share.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Doug Watkins, the Chief Executive of the Flyway Partnership, and my task is to identify challenges and opportunities for waterbird and wetland conservation, and also outline the work of the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership. The East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership is one of 9 flyways around the world, and in these flyways, birds are using the northern summer to breed. And then as summer finishes, they're moving back south all the way in the East Asian-Australasian Flyway down to southern Australia and New Zealand. And then as the seasons change, migrating again back to the northern summer. The East Asian-Australasian Flyway has over 50 million migratory waterbirds, covering 250 populations, 36 are globally threatened. And some of the shorebirds have been declining at a rate of 9% per year. And as we heard earlier, the East Asian-Australasian Flyway has the highest percentage of globally threatened and near threatened waterbird species in the flyway. So it is often referred to as the flyway most at risk. Key challenges. The key challenges for our work is building this flyway network of internationally important sites for wetlands that are sustainably managed to maintain migratory waterbird populations and their broader ecosystem services. 2, increasing awareness of the range of ecosystem services that are provided by these important wetlands, in particular related to livelihoods, carbon storage, and opportunities to mitigate some impacts of climate change. And here on the right is a table showing the value of wetlands and other ecosystem services, and the top ecosystems are all wetland ecosystems. A 3rd key challenge, increasing the required technical skills, capacity and resources for site management staff to enable sound wetland management and engagement with local communities. 4, addressing poor socioeconomic conditions that are resulting in unsustainable use of natural resources. 5, maintaining and enhancing the knowledge base that is essential to inform sound policy development and planning for the management of a flyway network of sites. And 6, increasing cooperation, support and resources to address these key challenges. Next to key opportunities. 1, utilizing the existing framework for national, regional and flyway collaborations across the 22 countries of the flyway, and getting the sustainable management of key sites for migratory waterbirds. 2, ensuring national work plans for multilateral environmental agreements address the need for a flyway approach to the conservation of migratory waterbirds and their key sites. 3, increasing cooperation among governments, research institutes, NGOs and citizen scientists on the monitoring of migratory waterbirds and contributing to the understanding of their life history and migration strategies. 4, developing preparatory support programs that enable country-driven initiatives within a flyway approach to strengthen institutional capacities, governance mechanisms, and to develop programs at scale for the conservation of migratory birds and the internationally important sites they depend on. 5th, enhance the implementation of existing flyway and national plans for maintaining key sites used by migratory water birds through the development of new financing mechanisms. So having addressed those two, now moving to the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership. It was established in 2002 as a Type 2 initiative at the World Summit on Sustainable Development, and it built on a previous 8 years of flyway experience from the Kashiro initiative. The EAAFP is a network of partners in a non-legally binding partnership. It's also recognised as a regional initiative under the Ramsar Convention, and it has a permanent secretariat hosted by Incheon Metropolitan Government and the Ministry of Environment, Republic of Korea. And this picture is the wonderful faces that we get to see every 2 years at our meeting of partners. The 39 partners of the Flyway Partnership consist of 18 governments. There are still 4 others that are not partners as yet. 6 intergovernmental organisations, which are primarily convention secretariats. 13 NGOs working at the international level. 1 international organisation and 1 private sector. The objectives of the partnership strategic plan, the current strategic plan, draw from our partnership document. The first is developing a network of internationally important sites. Second, enhance communication, education and public awareness. Third, enhance flyway research and monitoring activities. Fourth, building the habitat and waterbird management capacity of natural resource managers, decision makers and local stakeholders. And 5th, developing flyway approaches to enhance the conservation status of migratory waterbirds. Under these 5 objectives, our strategic plan identifies 23 key result areas that we're working on over the 10-year period. We have quite a range of working groups and task forces. These are expert groups that particularly work together on endangered species, but also other issues for the implementation of the partnership. The Flyway site network is the cornerstone of the partnership. Currently, we have 147 Flyway network sites, and they are shown as the red dots across the Flyway. And these are sites which we strive to have sustainably managed. They're all internationally important for migratory waterbirds, and that links back to the criteria of the Ramsar Convention. The sites are nominated by national government, and they endeavour to engage the local community both in the protection of the site, but also in sustainable utilisation. Maintaining ecosystem services of the sites is a key element of the philosophy, but we have one big issue, and that we've identified over 1,000 internationally important sites for migratory waterbirds across the Flyway, which means currently we are only 15% on the way to securing that network of sites for migratory waterbirds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. Clearly, we can see from your presentation, we have the more opportunity than the challenges today. We can balance the needs between the human and also the natural. So let me now turn to our second speaker, Dr. Liu Chai, Deputy Director, Center for East Asia and Australasia Flyway Studies. Dr. Liu has over 20 years experiences in wetland ecology and biodiversity conservation. Today he will present Waterbird and also wetland conservation in the PRC. Dr. Liu, floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Also good early morning. And I would like to introduce you the situation about waterbird and wetland conservation in China. And in the very beginning, can you still see the screen? Because I can't see.
Sure, we can see
Okay,
it.
good.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So this center is based in Beijing Forest University, and the major focus of this center is migratory ecology, which means endangered migratory waterbird conservation, and then associated habitat conservation and restoration. And also we think monitoring and tracking technology is very important for our study. Basing on the theoretical and technical studies, we like to promote database construction, which will provide a technical support to the flyway network size. And as we all know that we are also providing support to EAAFP as a science unit. Science unit of EAAFP is supported by National Forestry and Grassland Administration of People's Republic of China, and is also supported by Mangrove Foundation. It's just listed as a new partner of EAAFP. And talking about waterbird in China, there are totally 304 species recorded in China. About 134 species are using Chinese land as a stopover, and there are nearly 140 species are wintering in China, and nearly 150 species they breeding in China. From the picture, also just like Doug introduced, EAAF flyway is the largest flyway in China. Also, there are two more other flyways crossing China. One is the Central Asia Flyway, and the other is the West Pacific Flyway. And the waterbirds are using China as an important wetland habitat because in China we have vast resources of wetland. And on the left, you can see the map of China. This is the wetland inventory result in China. Here, the blue, dark blue along the coast are coastal wetland, and the yellow one are marshes and swamp in wetland. And here you can also you can see the light blue. These are rivers and lakes in China. And meanwhile, we also have a large area of artificial wetlands. This mainly farmland, such as the rice paddy. In total, the wetland area in China are 53.6 million hectares. This is why China plays such an important role in the East Asia-Australasian Flyway. Talking about conservation, we have to talk about the threats first. In China, maybe also in the other parts, in the EAAF, wetland reclamation is the #1 driver of habitat loss. Even though now in China, the wetland reclamation is stopped by central government, but the consequence of reclamation in the past is still a major issue. And the second one is hydrological alteration. When we talk about hydrology, sometimes we mean like marine hydrology driven by climate change, but also inland hydrology changing by major water projects, such as large dams. They alter the water regime in lower and younger reaches of large rivers, which will also impact estuary areas, which are both important for aquatic biodiversity and also migratory waterbirds. And invasive species, we all know, is another large issue, such as Spartina along Chinese coast in China. And also in inland wetland, there are also invasive species such as hydroxia, and because of eutrophication. So eutrophication then is another important factor that threats the waterbirds in China. And the last one is land use change. Even though some land is still staying there as wetland, but because people change the purpose of the land use, then it's another influence, such as they convert rice paddy into vegetable or farmland, or they convert corn or maize farmland.
Okay, you still have the 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry, I thought I got 10 minutes. Oh, sorry. Okay, so in China, we set up a wetland conservation systems. This including world protected areas such as Ramsar sites. We get 64 now, and then we have nature reserve. We have wetland park. We also have national wetland park. And just as the other experts mentioned, we now have World Heritage sites, the Yellow-Bohai Sea Migratory Waterbirds Sanctuary. And also under the wetland conservation system, there are national legislation and policy supports, such as the wildlife protection law. It just reversed in 2017. And also now the national law on wetland is under developing, which we could release it next year, adopt it next year. And also we have other policies released by the central government, such as wetland conservation and restoration orders, such as the zero loss of natural wetland policy and leadership or accountability in wetland conservation. Also, we have protected area system consolidation ongoing. And now we are still in the period of wetland conservation program planning. And also, we have very important policy for wetland eco-composition. And talking about the World Heritage, there are totally 16 sites, and now under phase 2 nomination being World Heritage site. We all know that Yancheng and Dafeng are already been nominated at the World Heritage list, and now all the other provinces are in progress. And let me introduce you about World Heritage Site phase 2 nomination. Now, the National Leadership Group on World Heritage nomination is established, is leading by NFGA and joint provinces, including Liaoning, Hebei, Tianjin, Shandong, Jiangsu, and Shanghai provincial or municipal government. And a technical support team was contracted, including Beijing Forest University and Beijing Normal University. And also we conducted the local staff training programs. So the draft document will be ready by the end of March of 2021. And so the World Heritage nomination is one important, but it just one action to promote Yellow-Bohai Sea migratory waterbird and their habitat conservation, such as to unify all the protected areas. We set up an alliance for the Yellow-Bohai Sea migratory waterbird conservation. And this is a group of protected areas to be nominated as a World Heritage Site, but meanwhile also is a conservation alliance. And this alliance was initiated at Yancheng. And just a very quick introduction on Yancheng. Now the roosting habitat restoration in Yancheng in Tiaozhni was started. And we observed more than 80 spawn-billed sandpiper and 1,150 Norman's grand shank. This is the largest record in the history in Tiaozhni. And also we activated SEPA and a research program in the area. And also with associated simultaneously monitoring activity along Chinese coast. I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lui. Your presentation clearly echoed the wonderful presentation also by CEO Patricia, particularly for the importance and urgency for nominating the World Heritage Site. You just mentioned about NFGA. You have the plan to nominate about the 16 sites. I understand that also NFGI is going to sign the MOU with the BirdLife International very soon. So definitely we can further discuss how other partners can also support the process. But the last speaker in this section is about is from the UK, Dr. David Stewart. He right now represents the European region on Ramsar's scientific and technical panel. On behalf of UK government, Dr. Stewart has over 30 years experiences and also helped manage and steer many of the UK bird monitoring programs already. He worked with a range of the NGO partner organizations, and today he's going to share lessons from the East Atlantic Flyway. Dr. Stewart, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good day. I'd like to home in on one aspect of experience in the East Atlantic Flyway, and that's our experiences in creating a protected site network along this amazing flyway chain, which links 54 countries from the Arctic to Southern Africa. It's one of 3 flyways in our African-Eurasian region. And I'd like to use 2 ways of doing this. One is to start with looking at a top-down perspective, looking at the enabling international frameworks which help us to create a site network. And the second is then to take a bottom-up approach, looking at good practice national experience in delivering site networks. So to start with a top-down approach, there are 5 international enabling frameworks within our flyway: the African-Eurasian Waterbird Agreement, or AWA, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, the European Union's Birds Directive, and the Council of Europe's Convention on European Wildlife, so-called Bern Convention, and finally, last but not least, the World Heritage Convention. And 2 of those, Ramsar and World Heritage Convention, have global scope, of course, and 3 are specific to our region, AWA, EU Birds Directive, and the Bern Convention. So just very briefly looking at each of those, the Waterbirds Agreement is massively important for waterbird conservation in our region. It's a legal treaty in force since 1999. But as far as protected areas go, it's not a main driver. It doesn't create its own designation, but it does recognize that parties need to continue to establish site networks. Of greater significance has been the Ramsar Convention, which obviously urges its parties to designate wetlands of international importance. And it has 3 criteria specifically relevant to waterbirds. And there are a large number of waterbird Ramsar sites that have been designated under those criteria since the convention entered into force in 1975. The EU Birds Directive is a legal framework and gives legal obligations on its formerly 28, now unfortunately 27 member states to designate strongly protected special protection areas. And the result of that activities you see is a very large number of legally protected sites across the European Union. And also of note is that there is because of its legal status, there is a compliance mechanism which allows the European Commission, the civil service of the EU, to enter into dialogue with contracting member states on issues around compliance, which has been very important. The Bern Convention can be considered as mirrors many of the requirements of the Birds Directive and is particularly relevant in Eastern and Southern Europe, and that has created an emerald network of sites which largely mirror EU Birds Directive special protection areas. And as I said, it's relevant especially to Eastern Europe and some North African countries who are parties. And then finally, we have the World Heritage Convention, as we've just heard, allows for the designation of natural sites of global importance. There's been a particularly significant initiative in the East Atlantic Flyway with the twinning of the international Waddenzee shared between Germany, Netherlands and Denmark, and the Bank d'Arguin National Park in Mauritania, which share many of the same birds along the coasts of Europe and Western Africa. And that's been a very successful endeavor. So those are the frameworks. Some other experience thinking about international top-down perspectives. Shadow lists such as BirdLife International's important bird area inventories have been hugely important and in providing a rich source of data to countries and those involved in site protection networks, and also more recently the multi-partner critical site network, which is an online information resource linking multiple databases and providing at a glance summaries of information both about species and about sites, and allowing users to drill down to underlying data. So there's a lot of information that's been out there which has been very supportive. So in terms of top-down conclusions for the East Atlantic Flyway, Ramsar sites and EU special protection areas have been absolutely critical to building an international network of protected sites along the Flyway. But unfortunately, no single MEA has really taken responsibility for Flyway scale audits. So we still really don't have a coherent oversight of activity across the whole Flyway, but hopefully AWA will at some point fill that gap. Now let's think about bottom-up national implementation. Good practice nationally. There have been some good national networks, or many good national networks established within the EU, but overall national implementation has been highly variable. There are a few countries which have designated many sites, but there are also many countries that have designated only a few. And within the Flyway, many key sites remain unprotected. Good practice lessons learned, although ultimately, of course, designation is the responsibility of government. Many countries in our region have found that the establishment of a national working group to help steer the process has been very helpful. And such a national working group typically should involve relevant government and NGOs and a range of national and international expertise when available. And there are obviously strong potential links to national Ramsar committees where these exist. And the early consensus building in a national working group between different actors at a national level really delivers long-term benefits when it comes to managing and conserving sites once they've been designated. And again, to reinforce the point at a national level, the use of shadow lists and existing expertise has been really important. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. The undertaking and publishing by government of a national review of important sites has been really important. It allows government to put on the record, these sites are important and this is why, and it really helps the process. Establishing Flyway scale coordination to facilitate implementation is really useful. And as I said, we don't really have that very well established in the East Atlantic Flyway. But where there has been coordination, it's really helped exchange national good practice and solutions between countries. It encourages coherency and allowing for the identification of holes in the network. For example, here in Europe at one point when one member state wasn't designating special protection areas. And it provides an important audit of content. So how are we doing? Are the key sites protected? And then finally, and to finish, bringing the sort of top-down and bottom-up approaches together. What I've done here is make a list of countries running from north to south over on the left, and putting here the number of Ramsar sites designated against the flyway, essentially. And you can see that in the north of the flyway, in Europe and Mediterranean and countries north, there's been a lot of activity, but not very much in the south. And I think this sort of enables us to really see that there are significant development and assessment needs in the southern part of the flyway. And a sort of a fully integrated approach would be really helpful. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. Indeed, the Atlantic experiences in terms of bring a top-down and a bottom approach together also very important for our proposed regional flyway program here. So before we move to the next session, may I request ADVDGs, James, Ramesh, Wu Chong, and also Warren, CEO Patricia, and also one of the speakers, can you turn on your video now for a group of photo? Because of some of the RDG need to have the meeting with the president office after the next meeting. Can I ask you to turn your video? And also by take this opportunity, I also want to say special thanks to DG Wu Chong, the Director General for Sustainable Development Climate Change Department. Wu Chong already been a champion and also instrumental in initiating this regional program. But today he going to have the urgent meeting to meet with the president, so he cannot give the closing remarks today. But we hope he can give us leadership and the guidance in the future. So Mark, have you already taken a photo?
Peach, please go ahead to take the photo now and let us know when completed. Thank you.
Okay, so with this, let me now turn to the floor to Mr. Jiangfeng Zhang, the Director of the ADB's Environment, Natural Resources, Agriculture Division for Southeast Asia Department. Mr. Jiangfeng going to moderate the session 2 of the webinar. Thank you so much.
Peach, all okay? Right, let's go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Qingfeng. Welcome to the second session of this webinar. And in the second session, we will hear the case studies from international development agencies. By the way, just to introduce myself, I'm Jiangfeng Zhang. I'm Director for the Environment, Natural Resource and Agriculture Division of Southeast Asian Department of ADB. As DG Ramesh has mentioned earlier, for example, in the Southeast Asian region, ADB and the countries have been working a lot on environment and natural resource management and biodiversity conservation. And we have been working on, for example, GMS biodiversity conservation corridor initiatives. We have been working on the, for example, Coral Triangle initiative. We are very happy to work together with you on this important flyway program. So in this case, we'll be able to cover natural resource management on the land, in the ocean, as well as in the sky. Thank you so much. So let me just introduce the first speaker. The first speaker will be Ms. Xiaoting Jin. Xiaoting is the Senior Project Officer of AFD. She is based in Beijing, and she is AFD focal point of biodiversity and innovation. She has been working on, for example, biodiversity conservation, sustainable urban and rural development, as well as natural and cultural heritage protection. So I will give the floor to Xiaoting. She will talk about AFD and waterland conservation in PRC. Xiaoting, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Zhang. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I'm very glad to participate to the webinar today and share AFD's experience on wetland conservation in China. So now I'm sharing my screen. So first of all, I'd like to briefly present AFD's strategy on biodiversity in China. we pursue 3 main objectives. First of, dedicated financing to biodiversity conservation, restoration, and wide use. Secondly, biodiversity mainstreaming, which consists in promoting the integration of biodiversity in other sectors financing, like green city, water and sanitation, energy, agriculture, or green finance. The third one is policy dialogues that we have with technical ministries. This action is currently supported by a grant from European Union, the China Biodiversity Facility, which allows to contributing to the preparation and implementation of the post-2020 agreement of CBD, and also to some priority topics identified together by AFD and EU. So now pass to wetland sector. We have a portfolio of 450 million euros starting from 2012, which covers 8 provinces and various types of projects, from river and lake restoration, integrated watershed management, to green and blue infrastructure, or coastal and marine area management. Now I want to say a little bit more on the experience of Wolong Lake, as it is an interesting case of wetland restoration with limited financing but significant results. When we started our intervention in 2012, the site was undergoing a drastic change. With a decision made by Shenyang municipality, the water level of the lake was increased by 1.5 meters. And following that, the wetlands vegetation was submerged by water, and all nature habitats were lost within 2 years. While the lake is one of the largest stopover sites between Siberia and southern China for many endangered species, in particular the Siberian crane, more than 90% of the world population stops there. So it was crucial to restore this wetland to save these species. The project was above all a battle over water uses. Local authorities actually, they saw the lake as a water reservoir and wanted to store as much water as possible to fight against possible droughts. From the ecological perspective, it was necessary to maintain water level not too high to ensure a variety of nature habitats for water birds. While local villagers, they continued to cultivate corns on banks of lake and invaded the buffer zone of wetlands. So we put in place a package of ecological engineering solutions to resolve all these problems. I won't enter into details of these solutions. A principal one was to restore and consolidate a dike that divided the lake in 2 parts with different functions. Northern part of deep water level, which serves as a water reservoir as wishes by local authorities, and a southern one with low water level, which serves as habitats for waterbirds. We also reinforced some hydraulic infrastructure, build touristic facilities like eco museum or observation tours, and accompanied some local initiatives on ecotourism development. So finally, with 15 million euro financing, I should point out that it's our smallest project in China in history. The project has brought some spectacular results in terms of biodiversity restoration. Through the 4 years of project implementation, the maximum daily hosting capacity of migratory birds has grown from 4,000 to more than 100,000. In the autumn migration season of last year, the daily bird population that we observed picked up more than 80,000 individuals, of which we counted more than near 2,000 individuals of Siberian cranes. So with these restoration results, Wolong Lake has met at least 2 criteria to be nominated as a Ramsar site. The Wetland Commission has launched the application process with the full support from AFD. Finally, I'd like to say a few words about lessons we have learned from past and some reflections. First, we observe conflicts over water uses on many projects, and the ecological use is always put behind urban, agricultural, hydraulic, or industrial needs. And it's not easy to ensure an integrated management at basin level, notably for large-scale rivers. We are always exposed to political risks at the local level with unpredictable changes of decisions or strategies. And this is particularly obvious for single project-based loans. Weak institutional capacity is a classic issue. Even though we always put capacity building as a component of our projects, the effectiveness of this kind of action varies a lot from project to project. Another problem is the efficient management of wetlands in the long run. The operation and maintenance of project infrastructure like hydraulic facilities, tourist facilities, especially when the project has finished and the international donor has left. So we think mobilizing different lobbying groups could be a useful way to respond to part of these problems. This may include government partnerships and pushes, participation of civil societies and other stakeholders. In the case of Wolong Lake, actually both international and local NGOs have played a crucial role in either ecological monitoring, bird observation, public awareness campaign, and political lobbying. Spike and his team of International Crane Foundation are supporting a flyway wide approach, including actions on Wolong Lake. They send us feedbacks on their field observation. This is particularly appreciable after we have closed and left the project. Another useful way to tackle the same problem is join national or regional labels and initiatives. We have pushed Wolong Lake to be listed as a Ramsar site and to join the EAAF partnership. Typically, it was for that purpose. Of course, more coordination between national donors could be necessary. This webinar could be a good starting to do that. And we hope to do more policy dialogue as well with national authorities in future to ensure better policy coherence. And last but not least, we think it could be interesting to explore more synergy between wetlands, biodiversity, and climate actions. This could bring more financial flows, especially from climate financing channels towards wetlands projects, promote more nature-based solutions, and push more convergence of national agendas on the three topics. This might be particularly relevant for China, who will host in next year the COP15 of CBD in Kunming and the COP14 of Ramsar in Wuhan. So thanks a lot for hearing, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Xiaoqing, for highlighting AFD's work in PRC. And let's come to the second speaker for this session, Dr. Wolfram Erhard, Country Director of KfW for PRC, will talk about an example on the Hanshu Lake wetland conservation. So Dr. Wolfram, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Zhang, thank you very much. Just check, do you hear me and do you see my slide?
Yes.
Perfect. So thanks a lot for inviting KfW to this very important and, as we see, also very well organized event. My name is Wolfram Erhard and I'm director of the KfW office in Beijing. Very briefly on KfW, most of you will know it. KfW is the promotional bank of the German government. We do have a significant promotional business domestically within Germany, not least now when it comes to supporting the German economy during the COVID pandemic. And internationally, amongst other things, we support developing and transition countries on behalf of the German government with investment projects in many areas, among them infrastructure finance and biodiversity protection. In Germany, in China, our work focuses on financing projects in the area of climate and environment. So the biodiversity topics that we're discussing today, you see, are at the heart of our activities. And approximately 2 years ago, a memorandum of understanding was signed between the Chinese and German government expressing the wish of both sides to continue the work in climate and environment. So the case study I wanted to present is on Hengshui Lake, where we believe this project is particularly successful and therefore also a good candidate to be presented here in this forum. The lake is located in the densely populated BTH area in Hebei province in northeast China. And it is actually an artificial water body that is fed by the Yellow River. It's also an EAAF site, and there is the plan to also nominate it for the Ramsar process. And this actually is due to this lake being a major waterfowl area with a lot of migrating and so birds migrating and wintering there. And particular noteworthy is this bear's pochard that many of you will know much better than myself. But I've learned that there are only 1,000 pieces left of them globally. And there are approximately 300 of them actually migrating through Hengshui Lake annually. And there are approximately 5 pairs every year that breed. So this bird has been discovered only approximately 10 years ago and is important. So we provide to this project a German financial contribution on behalf of the German government, consisting of 12 million euro in terms of a soft loan and 200,000 euro in terms of consultancy support in order to support local government in properly implementing this project. Key challenges, so there were inadequate reserve boundaries, which basically meant that important habitats have been left out from the reserve zone. There is significant habitat loss ongoing and also water inadequately managed, so that actually the water intake has regularly destroyed nesting areas of the various species living in that area. And also there is, let's say, insufficient access of local population to the area, meaning that fishing activities and other activities of visitors have disturbed the breeding area. Another key aspect is lack of knowledge and awareness as regards generally the ecological value, but also as regards this concrete reserve that, let's say, there was a significant lack of know-how and management expertise at local government. So the key project components address exactly that. What we have been doing together with our local partners is to reset the reserve zoning so that the boundaries of this reserve are properly set to include all important and necessary areas. There is also measures ongoing in terms of close to nature rehabilitation of the lake shoreline. So simply speaking, we take concrete out and replace that by proper water vegetation. And then there's an interesting, let's say, accompanying measure in the terms of awareness raising and education. So there's a visitor center that's being refurbished and upgraded, and support is being provided for education for sustainable development. A nature experience trail is under construction. And interestingly, there is also an excursion boat that has been transformed into a sort of floating classroom that is used to bring students onto the lake and educate them on the spot on important ESD topics. Other interesting things are, of course, the attempt to work towards institutional sustainability. So, for instance, a local university is involved who is then working on biodiversity and water quality monitoring long-term, so far beyond, obviously, of the project duration itself. As regards the water quality, purification wetland has been established at the intake of that lake in order to plant reed that basically acts as a natural sewage plant and contributes thus to improving the water quality already at directly at the intake of this lake. So in short, the project in a really comprehensive way contributes to improving the biodiversity at Hang Shui Lake. And the idea obviously is to do this long-term and in a sustainable manner. The project is very well underway, I can say. It's very encouraging and obviously in an area that's highly densely populated and thus particularly challenging. But it enjoys, I must also say, very significant and strong support from the local government. So it's not only successful in terms of biodiversity protection, but it's also a lot of fun to work there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wolfram, for informing about this Hang Shui conservation project. As you mentioned, this is a comprehensive initiative. From my side, I'm very interested in hearing from you that you are linking this project together with the education for sustainable development and educating the students on the natural resource management on the spot. Very interesting. Thank you. So let's come to our third speaker. It's my colleague, Dr. Ziming Liu, Senior Environment Officer of ADB. He will give a case study from ADB side in terms of the Jiangsu Yancheng project. So Ziming, over to you. Thank you.
Sorry, I had some problem with my system.
Jiming, perhaps try the button at the very bottom of the screen on your PowerPoint. There we go. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. Very glad to have this opportunity to share the case of Jiangsu Yancheng wetlands management. My presentation will have 5 parts. Let me start with this map of the flyway. The red dots indicate the locations of ADB projects that supported wetland conservation. Many of these wetlands are critical habitats for migrating birds along the flyway, such as Sanjiang Plain, Inner Mongolia, Dalai Lake, Ningxia Yingchuan wetlands, Gansu Heihe wetlands, and Yancheng wetlands, which I'm going to present. About the Yancheng coastal wetlands, the total area is over 400,000 hectares. The area is the largest entitled mudflat system in the world. It's also a hotspot in the EAAF, which provides habitats for over 400 recorded bird species. 29 are using red list, such as red-crowned crane, oriental white stork, spool-billed sandpiper and some snipes. It also holds the largest nature reserve for Milu, or pure David's deer, animal species extinct also in the wild, according to the IUCN Red List. About 70% of the population is here. Surely 2 nature reserves are Ramsar sites. The wetland was enlisted as a UNESCO World Heritage Natural Site in July last year. As per UNESCO, the areas are of global importance for the gathering of many migratory bird species that use the East Asia-Australasia Flyway. Large gathering of birds, including some of the world's most endangered species, depend on the coastline as a stopover to moult, rest, winter, and nest. Here's the map of Yancheng wetlands. However, with the economic growth, there are also great challenges to balance conservation and development. Jiangsu province, where the Yancheng wetlands locate, is one of highly developed provinces in the PRC. In past decades, wetlands were reclaimed largely for agriculture, aquaculture, industry, and expansion of urban areas. Natural habitats are degraded dramatically due to excessive dehydration, rapid spread of invasive species, and pollution from land resources. For example, from 1980s to 2010, about half of the wildlife habitat vanished, while the area of fish ponds expanded 8 times. Although nature reserves were established already in Yancheng wetlands since 1990s, inadequate financing resources, limited management facilities and infrastructures, as well as a weak institutional capacity, restricted what the authorities can do to maintain a healthy ecosystem of the wetlands. So to address these challenges, the government requested ADB to support a demonstration project to protect these important wetlands. The project integrated engineering measures to restore and rehabilitate the wetlands and forestry habitats, livelihoods for local communities, as well as capacity building for management agencies. At the Bird Nature Reserve, engineering interventions were made, included landscape regulating, habitats creation, revegetation to restore degraded wetlands. Structures such as pumping stations were also built to regulate water levels in the core zone to maintain appropriate wet habitats for birds, particularly red-crowned crane. About 1,500 hectares of fish ponds were converted back into wetlands. Pilots of invasive species control, particularly for the rapid spread of Spartina, were also implemented. Sorry. At Milu Nature Reserve, the project supported the improvement of Milu breeding and management facilities, include grazing habitat, drinking ponds, resting ground, and fodder bases. The project also improved management of 2 forestry farms, which provide habitats for wood birds in the buff zones. These forestry farms also provide sustainable livelihoods for local communities through agriculture, ecotourism, and other forestry-based small businesses. Meanwhile, the project supported extensive capacity building for the nature reserves and the forestry farms, such as operational management plans, public education, staff training, and ecological monitoring systems. Capacity development was also extended to provincial institutions through supporting policy research, for example, operationalized eco-compensation regimes, etc. The project was implemented starting from 2013 to 2018, and has achieved quite promising results. One of major achievements was that the project directly contributed to the successful listing of Yancheng wetlands as a UNESCO World Heritage natural site. About 5,000 hectares wetlands were restored and rehabilitated, which provide healthy and critical habitats for birds. This has enhanced the biodiversity richness in the nature reserves. For example, both number of bird species and the population increased greatly. Population of birds at the core zone of the nature reserve grew by 3 times. The Milu deer has reached over 5,000 heads by 2019, last year, accounting for over 70% of the world population. Meanwhile, the institutional capacity of management authorities was strengthened. The public education facilities, for example, have catered to 30,000 students annually as centers for learning in environment and biodiversity. The project also promoted the effective participation of local communities. The training activities strengthened the community's awareness and skills for wetlands-friendly farming and fishing practices. We also produced certain knowledge products as the images show. For example, a case study for developing Asia and some publications related to wetlands management. The project demonstrated an integrated approach to manage and protect wetlands, as mentioned earlier. These interventions need to be continuously reviewed to assess their long-term effectiveness. Restoration works may also need to apply more nature-based solutions, particularly in formulating ideal habitats for migrating waterbirds and the maintenance of the restored wetlands. Enhanced institutional capacity and monitoring systems are also very key to improving the condition of wetlands and sustaining ecosystem services and functions. New technologies for wetlands and biodiversity management and monitoring are also very promising. Continuous international collaboration is also very important in managing this heritage site. For example, this flyway initiative that we are discussing today. Anyway, it's still a long way to go. Okay, let me stop here. I will be very glad to discuss during the following Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zimin, for informing about this Yancheng wetland conservation project. This project is very successful. As you mentioned, it also helped to list the Yancheng wetland as a UNESCO wetland heritage natural site. And I can understand also during the period of project implementation, actually you have been working very hard. So it also basically very good to hear from you some lessons learned from the project implementation. So from my side, thank you so much for the hard work in making the project successful. Thank you, Zimin. So in this, let me just conclude the session 2. Thank you so much for the 3 speakers. Thank you very much. So I will turn over to my colleague, Bruce, for the session 3. Bruce, over to you.
Great, well, thanks very much, Zhengfeng, and really appreciate all the presentations so far. The webinar today is a really great opportunity to work very, very closely with countries in the region, with civil society organizations and other development partners on this really important topic. So my name is Bruce Dunn. I am ADB's Chief for Environment and also the Director for Safeguards at ADB. It's my pleasure to moderate this next session, session 3, where we'll be discussing Regional Flyway Initiative or program that we're proposing to try and support the ongoing initiatives and help to scale those up. Now, at this stage in the webinar, I think we've really heard a lot from our speakers in terms of the importance of the East Asia-Australasian Flyway, but also some of the critical challenges and threats to it. You know, I was shocked, Patricia's initial comment around 1 football pitch every 6 seconds in terms of wetlands being lost. You know, that's phenomenal. So certainly something to address there. But of course, there are ongoing strategies and there's progress that's being made under the East Asia-Australasia Flyway Partnership. The building of the broader network around internationally important sites is very important. But of course, also, as we heard, that many sites remain unprotected. I think only about 15% of the sites, more than 1,000 sites that do need further consideration and protection within the flyway itself. It's also been great to hear the global experience and good practice and you know, some of the key points there that we need to think about in terms of taking forward, like establishing national working groups, review of important sites, use of existing shadow lists in terms of identifying priorities, and establishing flyway scale coordination and facilitation. You know, so using this mix of both bottom-up and top-down approaches. So this is incredibly important. We need an integrated approach, and this obviously needs to be supported through capacity development and enabling conditions. And we've heard also from quite a number of partners already in terms of their work and experience, and just in the last session, AFT, KFW and ADB. But of course, there are many partners working on these topics from civil society and the countries themselves. So there's a lot to build on. Now, in this next session, what we're going to be doing is I'll pass in a moment to my colleague from ADB, Mr. Duncan Lang. He's a senior environment specialist who's been working on the initial development of a concept for a regional flyway initiative. He'll be presenting in tandem with colleagues from BirdLife International, Mr. Vinayangan Dharmaraja. He's a regional director with BirdLife International, and also Gary Allport, who's the senior advisor to BirdLife CEO Patricia Zarita. So I'll pass to them in a moment, and they'll run you through a brief presentation to share some initial outline of ideas in terms of how we might be able to strengthen the ongoing programs moving forward. Followed by that, we will have 6 discussants who will provide very brief, maximum 5-minute interventions to provide some of their own perspectives on from their own country perspective or from their organizations in terms of the initiative being proposed, but also some of their broader perspectives. So I'll get started with Duncan Lang, and then following that, I will introduce the other speakers in turn. Now we're a little bit behind the time schedule, so I would just ask all the speakers and colleagues to keep a close watch on the time, and I will also come in and remind you if we're running over time. Okay, with that, I pass over to you, Duncan, if you'd like to share your screen for the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully everybody could see the presentation. If you can't, just let me know. So as Bruce said, this has been a collaborative exercise between ourselves and BirdLife International. And I should say as well, we've had some great feedback as well internally at ADB, as well as externally from some other key contributors. Okay, just moving on. Okay, so I'll very quickly talk you through where we are with biodiversity at the moment. We've heard all this already, so I won't go into it in detail. I'll then maybe touch on why ADB really thinks that we can add value and get involved now, because some of you may be wondering that. Then Vina will talk on what the scaled up initiative may look like, its structure, long-term targets, and maybe look at some of the key sites. Then I will go into our proposed development phase for the scaled up initiative, and also the implementation phase as well. I'll include a couple of the key components that we'll be looking at, as well as shouting out the next steps that we plan to take. Okay, so I won't go into this in detail. We've done this before, but we're in a bad situation. IG targets, none are going to be met, and at least at ADB, we certainly feel that biodiversity now really needs to become a core part of projects that we're doing rather than an added value. You know, it's great that institutions like ADB want to do poverty alleviation, but we shouldn't be doing it at the expense of biodiversity. So we're championing a more holistic approach moving forward. And it's the right time to do that with things like CBD COP coming up next year. And as well, we're in the middle of this horrendous pandemic. We also know now very well the huge ecosystem services that wetlands can provide, as well as the livelihoods that they can help restore and improve. So, you know, why should ADB get involved? What is our value? Well, certainly, as DG Ramesh was saying, we have a long history of regional cooperation. It's in fact in our original charter for when the bank was set out. We also have a strategy that was under development to bring in more biodiversity projects at ADB, and we also have existing operational priorities in which a flyway program would fit extremely well. ADB also has a long track record of working with the governments in the region. We also have, of course, good relationships with donors, which are also on the flyway, say like Japan or Australia. And so we feel like we can hopefully play a role in catalyzing action. And really, you know, we're at a time where, you know, previously these type of projects were always needed, but were they really wanted by our developing member countries? And that dialogue is certainly changing, which really gives ADB a mandate to look at this and do projects which are really biodiversity positive, like never before. So with this, I'll pass over to Vina, and Vina will talk you through the initiative. Over to you, Vina.
Can you hear me, Duncan?
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for this opportunity to sort of co-present with you. Certainly, in terms of how we see this as two components. The first is an investment pipeline. This will be sort of scaled up investment at key sites. The focus principally on formally protected and managed areas. The interactions will be with line ministries and governments. And so these will take the form generally of loans advanced as part of bank's business to individual governments to support action in terms of these sites. So this would be loans and grants advanced to governments, but with support from multilateral and bilateral partners supporting the bank. But the second component is what we call the sustainable financing mechanism. This will really be sort of funding to support on the work ground at priority sites along the flyway, but also to look at sort of strategic issues. This will involve work outside formally protected areas and will involve some work in relation to protected areas where critical specialized interventions are required, and especially where there is a need for a strong collaboration between government, civil society, and academia. This will be a series of grants and market-based instruments, but principally sort of grants given to organizations working at these sites. And the important thing here is the element of, is the complementing element. So it is really to look at what governments are doing, and for civil society, the private sector, academia to sort of complement that sort of action by working both at sites where governments work, and also at sites which are not formally protected. Next slide, Duncan. Thank you very much. Just in terms of the targets and what we want to achieve, we're looking at 50 what we call prioritized sites. These are sites that will be under protection and sustainable management. These will be sort of identified, and their values sort of really sort of strengthened, and we'll make sure that these are the flagship sites of the entire sort of endeavor. But the second priority is equally important, which is really looking at sites which have been prioritized but are in absolute need of improved site condition. So it is strengthening site condition, improving the values of the site, reducing poaching, increasing the size of the habitat, that sort of thing. But then also looking as a second element at important sites that are not under formal protection and sustainable management. Again, identifying values, documenting them, improving the conservation status of those sites, and then as a sort of second stage, looking at working with governments to get them sort of formally protected. The third element of this is looking at the flyway as a network, and this is a point that has been sort of made by several speakers today. But it is important that as part of this initiative, we're not going to be looking at sort of just developing or supporting conservation at individual sites. We've got to look at how these sites sort of link up with other sites, looking at them as a coherent whole, and in sort of individual interventions, making sure that those interventions make sense from a global or flyway-wide sort of perspective. As indicators, species are fantastic. So we've heard a lot about the spoonbill sandpiper, we've heard about the Norman's greenshank. Great species that give us a sense. I mean, obviously we want to conserve them, but they also give us a strong sense of how we're doing. So if those numbers are going up, it means that we're doing well. We want to use species as sort of indicators to sort of measure our success, and hopefully that will demonstrate at the end of the period that we have been doing absolutely the right thing in terms of our interventions. World Heritage designation, China has been fantastic in terms of its leadership. And on the LOC, it's phase 1 inscription, which was completed last year, and China is now looking at phase 2. This initiative potentially can support World Heritage designation in relation to China's efforts, complementing its efforts, looking at where additional support is needed, but at all times sort of working with China to sort of achieve that. But the other important thing here is that this has started the leadership that China showed in relation to the LOC has started a broader conversation within Asia, which is, can we sort of designate a whole bunch of sites across the entire flyway as a sort of network of sites deserving World Heritage designation. So that's something that we can also look at in the context of this initiative, and to see whether it would make sense to sort of, for countries to be working together to try and achieve that sort of status. And finally, and Duncan has alluded to this, and certainly, you know, at BirdLife, we're hugely supportive of this. The biodiversity is important, but we've got to also deliver other services, ecosystem services. Economic development has got to be a central part of this. Green infrastructure, we've got to make sure that development is green. We've got to make sure that the project also has got climate benefits. And local livelihood incomes must be delivered both through community management and sustainable natural resource management. So the co-benefits element, I mean, this is very much a biodiversity sort of project, but the co-benefits are absolutely critical. And how we sort of develop that in the context of the projects will be important. Duncan, back to you. Sorry, just one little slide here, and really this sort of underscores the point made by Doug Watkins earlier, that we've got, you know, we've got these 50 sites which are really important for shorebirds along the Chinese coast and along Southeast Asia, but we're only sort of covering about 15% of those sites. There is a broader set of sites, and really we hope that this project will allow us to sort of get into protecting some of those other sites as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Veena. So I will quickly rattle on. So we have kind of split this into two phases, really, the development phase and then the implementation phase, as I said before. So the development phase, we kind of feel that this would run for the next couple of years. We think maybe this would need about 2 to 3 million to do this. We would also look to try and leverage additional financing through this stage as well. The outputs from this development stage, one of the key ones would be to confirm the sites to include in the investment program. And then for a first cohort of sites would be to identify the targeted interventions that would be made at these sites, what we would be trying to deliver. As mentioned before, there would be some capacity building and a needs assessment as part of that. And the other key thing we would be doing at this stage would be to develop the sustainable financing mechanism and to also try and crowd in further financing. So moving on to the implementation phase, I think this is a really key point. What would be the delivery horizon for this? Well, we've kind of split this into two. One is a 10-year window up to 2030, and then there's a longer term, more aspirational one up to 2050. This is in line with the post-2020 biodiversity framework, which is, out there at the moment. And in terms of how maybe ADB would implement this would be maybe on a 5-year cyclical basis. The focus at the moment would probably be in China and Southeast Asia and on coastal sites, but our approach would be very flexible, I think. And, we've heard some great examples of key flyway sites that are, in inland waters. So this would be flexible. So our partners and developing member countries could, lead the dialogue on what sites should be included. Of the two components that Veena mentioned, the first one for the investment pipeline, we think over that whole 30-year period, we'd be talking about 2 to 5 billion would be needed to secure those 50 sites. That would be a total investment from all partners. As we've seen from those examples, the amount of money invested, we think probably per site might be about 10 to 50 million. And the sites that would be selected would obviously be ones that are of high value for bird conservation, but they would also have other biodiversity values as well. And then I think we would try and focus on ones where additional ecosystem services could be delivered, things like climate regulation, etc. We'd also want some national and local community support and the opportunity for improved livelihood. As mentioned before, we'd be looking to fund through bilateral, multilateral sources, and this would kind of be delivered through loans and grants and using, different financial instruments. There's one there for you, which might be a good fit. We'd again look to take the capacity building that we might have done in the development phase, but that would go into the implementation phase. For this to be sustainable in the long run, we need to build that capacity in the long term. And as I said before, we try and do a flexible approach because we don't know what will present itself as time would pass. The second key component, this is the sustainable financing mechanism. It could use the model of the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, if you have any questions on that, Patricia could probably do a good Q&A on it because she used to lead it. We think that, you know, grant money maybe to 15 to 20 million per cycle would be appropriate. So that would be 2 cycles in the first 10 years. The focus, as Vina said, would kind of be regional, covering strategic level issues, but also there would be that ability to do site interventions and on a country basis. Again, as Vina said, and as kind of really laid bare by Doug, there's a lot of sites that are outside the protected area network. So this mechanism would focus there, and it would try and bridge that gap where government funding is not available. It would look also to try and develop a long-term self-financing mechanism. Things like eco-compensation and market-based instruments are 2 ways that might be possible. And the mechanism would also look to support and complement the activities that are already going on by governments and CSOs. So moving forwards, you know, this is a fantastic session today. It's something I'm extremely happy to be part of and proud to be involved in. We need to continue this consultation. We're very excited to get your feedback today of what we're doing. We need to work out what are the elements that really our partners want to be bring in, and we need to talk to government and get their buy-in. So that's our kind of next step. We also need to get the financing to take this development phase forward, and also to hopefully get some co-financing. And then the idea, as DG Jim mentioned at the beginning, would be for us to kind of launch our scaling up initiative in next year at the CBD COP. So that's it. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions later on. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Duncan and Vina. So for everyone joining today, so there's an initial proposal there for support for scaled up actions and of course partnership and collaboration in terms of implementing this. It's a very early stage proposal, so of course we'll need to spend lots of time together working through the details and seeing how this could be implemented as a collaborative venture, and I think through that, of course, we'd be seeking to mobilize additional financing to really help increase conservation and management across the flyway. Now, of course, to start the discussion, we have got today 6 discussants that we have invited to give some initial feedback in terms of what do they see in terms of the flyway program and proposal, and then of course potential opportunities and roles for national agencies and civil society organisations in helping to take this forward. We're very fortunate that we have representatives from 3 national agencies and then 3 representatives from civil society organisations. I'll firstly start by introducing the 3 national representatives, and then I'll ask them in turn to have some brief remarks. Just a reminder to everyone in this session, maximum 5 minutes has been allocated. I know some of you have got some brief presentations, but we really need to make sure that comes into the 5-minute period. We are a bit behind schedule, so we'll have to try and keep on that one. I will introduce you, give you the floor. I'll then turn my camera off, but I will turn my camera back on when you've got a minute to go, and then I'll give you a wave when time is running out so that we can go on to the next speaker. So I hope that's okay. Sorry to put you under pressure there. Okay, no, so in introducing the speakers, so first we will have Dr. Meng Xianlan, Director General for State Forestry and Grasslands Administration from the People's Republic of China. That will be followed then by Ms. Xu Fenyang, Director for the Sungai Buloh Wetland Reserve and National Parks Board in Singapore. And then Mr. Yoyung Visal, Deputy Chief of Office from the Department of Freshwater Wetlands in the conservation, Wetlands Conservation from the General Directorate of Administration for Nature Conservation and Protection in the Ministry of Environment, Cambodia. So they will be our first three speakers. I'll introduce our civil society speakers a little bit later on. So if I can now call on Mr. Shanlin, you have the floor with your 5 minutes. If you could turn on your camera and then over to you.
Bruce, may I just step in quickly? My sincere apology. Thank you. My sincere apology. May I please introduce Dr. Hu Yunhui. Dr. Hu is the Deputy Director General for the Department of International Cooperation of the State Forestry and Grassland Administration. We had a late change. My apology, Bruce, for not sending that through to you. Thank you very much. Mr. Hu, thank you for your understanding. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks and welcome, Mr. Hu. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Chairperson. And good afternoon, everyone. Actually, my colleagues from China has already presented very good presentations, particularly the presentation about the conservation in Yancheng Nature Reserve. It well presented the problems we faced in the 1980s and the 1990s, and also showcased the achievements that after the implementation of the conservation program. What I'm going to do is to add more information at the national level in terms of wildlife conservation. Actually, I think the government agencies should play a decisive role for wetland conservation and the migratory bird protection. China has always attached great importance to the cooperation with the partnership and has already benefited from the collaboration. We have 64 sites designated as wetlands of international importance. 6 cities has honored as an international wetland city. We have set up 602 wetlands nature reserves around the country and nearly 900 national parks. 19 wetlands nature reserves in China has already joined the network for protected areas. Meanwhile, we also noticed that according to the researches and investigation, among all the migration flyway around the globe, as mentioned by other speakers, the East Asia-Australasia Flyway has the highest proportion of endangered and threatened species. Some of the species are declining by almost 20% annually, which is alarming for us. There are many factors behind the sharp decline. It may be related to pollution, poaching, invasive species, or even climate change. However, the most important factors, as we all believe, is the massive loss of wetlands habitats along the flyway. In my country, though many efforts has been made in terms of wetlands conservation, in some part of the country, the wetlands area are still shrinking. We lost several 100,000 hectares of wetlands from 2003 to 2013. From the international communication, we understand this may not be a problem faced by China alone. Actually, it is a common phenomenon faced by most countries along the flyway. In this context, it is particularly important to strengthen the collaboration in wetlands conservation among all members along the flyway. China has made a great effort in the past decade and will continue to do so to promote the conservation and restoration of wetlands, leave a reliable habitat for migratory bird, waterbird. There are many bird watching events. I think that is the benefit of joining the partnership. We believe one benefit is to enhance the public awareness. I was quite happy to see from that watching activity a great enhancement of public awareness has been made in China. China also implemented several multilateral programs and projects related to wetlands and migratory bird conservation. The purpose of those projects are to improve the management capacity of wetlands protected area and the conservation of migratory bird habits. In 2012 and 2016, China and the partnership jointly promoted 2 resolutions at the IUCN World Conservation Congress regarding the coastal wetlands conservation along the Yellow Sea and Bohai Sea. Given the flyway is an interconnected area, my country stands ready to continue the communication and cooperation with countries along the flyway. We hope the activity we did under the partnership can jointly enhance the development and management of wetland protected area and effectively improve the biodiversity in the flyway region. Finally, I wish the webinar a complete success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director General Hu, and thank you so much for keeping very well to the I really appreciate that, and particularly really support, of course, the remarks in terms of the work and commitment that is happening in the People's Republic of China, but also importantly, your message of support for further collaboration with partners across the flyway, which is incredibly important and very much welcome at this time. So thank you again for joining us today, and apologies for not catching the change before. We're very glad you can join us. Next, however, let me move on to introduce our next speaker for the session today. As I mentioned before, Ms. Shufen Yang from Singapore. Ms. Yang, can I please give you the floor? 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Ms. Young, I can see your screen there, and that's coming through clearly. Not yet seeing you or hearing your voice, so if you could just come through.
Bruce Shufan kindly mentioned that she's on a fairly slow Wi-Fi connection, and in case, let's just give her a few seconds, but Shufan, please send us a quick message in the chat box or by email if you're having a problem with your video. No problem on the video, and we can help you if you'd like to say next in the chat box. We can move through the slides if that works for you. Just let us know. Thank you. Thanks, Bruce.
Okay, thank you. I can see actually that, Ms. Young, you have yourself on mute at the moment. Can you just, that may be the problem there. If you can just check. Yeah, that's, there we go. You're off mute at the moment. You'd like to just try speaking again? No, you're now back on mute again. What I would suggest, as there may be a connection issue as well, for you just to turn off the sharing of the video, sorry, of the presentation. We can do that for you on a separate line if that's giving troubles with the bandwidth. So if you can stop sharing your screen and then unmute yourself so we can hear you. There we go. I can see you, but you're on mute. You can just click the button for mute. Yeah, that's, yeah, okay. You're now off mute, but unfortunately we still can't hear you. There might be some problem there with your microphone. Mark, I'd suggest, unfortunately, we might need to keep moving. Perhaps in the background, we can check separately with Ms. Shufen if we can get her line working. But for now, so that we can keep going with the next speakers, I suggest that we move on. Is that okay?
Yes, fully understand, Bruce. Thank you. Over.
Okay, apologies, Ms. Shufen. Let's see if we can get you back online at a later stage. So let me then move on to Mr. Yung Visal from Cambodia. Can I ask you to also turn on your video and unmute yourself and then take the floor? Okay, thanks. I can see your screen sharing is now coming through. I can see you. The floor is yours. Over to you. Thank you.
So I just want to check, do you hear me?
Yes, coming through very clearly. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much for this meeting. Today I represent Dr. Sreesan Liang to give you guys the presentation on the migratory bird and its flyway conservation and management in Cambodia. I will focus on the procedure to be in the flyway network. So now I just want to let you know that currently Department of Freshwater Wetland Conservation, we focus on 12 wetland area around Cambodia, and 5 of them are designated as the Ramsar site, and one wetland area is designated as a flyway network. Now let me show you the process how to establish the flyway network site. First step, we have to gather to collect the data and also to do the literature review and to get all the information about the site. And then we prepare for the site information sheet and also propose the flyway network site map. And after that, we organize the consultation workshop with other stakeholders, as well as especially with the local community. And after getting a good result, so we will we will ask the approval from our Minister of Environment, and then we prepare for the proposal and submit the submit the site information sheets to the EAAF partnership secretariat for the review. And after the secretariat finalize the site information sheet and also accept our proposal, so then we the Ministry of Environment we issue the official letter, and the EAAF partnership will issue the certificate of recognition. So here is our experience in 2019 that we established a Long Pring protected landscape as a flyway network site, and yep, we conduct like a consultation workshop, and also we go through like the process that I mentioned earlier. After we get after the site has been established, this as the FNF, so we disseminate the event and celebrate of the celebration of the site as the first Cambodia flyway network site. And for as the Cambodia as the partner, we are trying to nominate more wetland that are potential for migratory bird as a flyway network, and continue cooperate with other partner for conserving and protecting the bird and its habitat along their flyway. The benefit of the flyway program, so we can engage the regional and international cooperation among the wetland that support migratory bird, and also promote the cross-regional cooperation and conservation of migratory bird and its habitat along the flyway, and also giving technical support to the wetland that become the flyway network site. We also have can share experience and exchange on the migratory bird conservation and site management among the member of state and FNS. The international recognition on the important wetland to the migratory birds, and also have a potential support and funding from the relevant partner as well. We also can gain the knowledge and also bird information sharing among the member state and FNS. And for the migratory bird conservation and monitoring, so we conduct the bird survey and monitor and monitoring by the local rangers, and we also prepare and the update the bird data, and also establish the wetland site managers network, and also conduct the capacity buildings to a ranger and the local monitoring team. We also have we organize the World Migratory Bird Day, also the Bird Festival and Nature Expo, and we also annually organize the World Wetland Day, and also the bird watching trip to the flyway network site especially for the student from the university. This is my presentation. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you very much for a really interesting presentation from the Cambodia side. I'm really appreciating you be able to join today. It's great to see the work there on the Cambodia side and the importance that you've noted in terms of the Flyway program. So very much appreciate that. Obviously very important Cambodia with the coastal wetlands and also the Tonle Sap complex. So very pleased that you can join and share those remarks. Now we'll keep moving, and I'd like to now try another opportunity. If yes.
Hi, Mark. Can you? Hi, Bruce. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you very clearly.
I apologize. Let me see if
So
I can share my screen with you guys. Okay, could you push lights on for me? I'm just going to do this from my phone. I appreciate if you can screen the slides for me instead.
Great.
Could you do that?
Mark, can you just share those? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So while Mark is doing the screen sharing,
I've shared the screen.
Thank you.
Just let me know and just say next when you'd like me to move to the next one.
Yes. Thank you so much. Sorry for the delay. So I'm Shu Fen from Singapore. I'm speaking today on behalf of the ASEAN Flyway Network, which comprises of the 10 ASEAN member countries. And also this is done in collaboration with our ASEAN Center for Biodiversity colleagues. So thank you for your patience. I'm going to skip to the next slide immediately. Could you go next? Thank you. The next slide. And I think the next slide is just to set the focus that geographically, we are right in the midst of Southeast Asia, the 10 ASEAN member countries. We know how connected we are in terms of the shared species and issues. And this is also partly because of the good groundwork that the EAAFP partnership has given us for the past years, which set the foundation for the establishment of the ASEAN Flyway Network, as you can see in the next slide. It is very gratifying for me to hear the various concerns for the gaps in this flyway, especially in the Southeast Asia region, as there has been quite a fair bit of discussion raising the issues and the concerns about what help can be given and assistance to the Southeast Asia region. We discussed this at the EAAFP Meeting of Partners 8 in 2015, and in 2017, collectively we decided that maybe one of the mechanisms to help to move things along would be to go through a governmental framework where Singapore helped to facilitate, to put up a proposal to the via the ASEAN framework, where we presented at the ASEAN Working Group for Nature Conservation of Biodiversity. This is a framework where the government officials attend, and an official national focal point that looks specifically into the conservation of wetlands and migratory waterbirds are. And we got endorsed very fast and very thankfully with the help and inputs from EAAFP, from Wetlands International and BirdLife International, as well as the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. And at the same time, with the establishment of the network, we also initiated a project. So could you go to the next slide for me? Thank you. So we came together as a network where all 10 members of the ASEAN member states will be represented, and they form the core members. We work mainly by consensus, but at the same time, we recognize that the government cannot do this alone. And there are many expertise that will help us to achieve the conservation of wetlands and migratory waterbirds in this area. Therefore, we included very specifically in this framework that we would like to work with intergovernmental bodies, NGOs, academics, etc. And if you go to the next slide, So that's the next slide basically shares with us that we need to understand the terms of reference. So we had 5 key visions to achieve, which is to really facilitate the cooperation and exchange of knowledge and experience. And today, I also thought that it was really heartening and aligned that that's precisely the establishment of the ASEAN Flyway Network to come together from a regional scale to provide very specific focus and attention to better facilitate the cooperation and exchange, and to support very specifically site level managers, as there are many challenges that they face. At the same time, where funding is available, we would like to coordinate and facilitate the implementation of activities collectively. This also gives us a very important part in the flyway, which is connectedness, rather than to try to tackle the conservation of a particular wetland in one small area without seeing the whole picture holistically. And importantly, to support the conservation, and I think earlier we mentioned about how do we facilitate nomination of the sites, whether it's a flyway network site or whether it's a heritage site, that this ASEAN Flyway Network of partners will provide strategic recommendations to the relevant ASEAN working groups. And from there, the ASEAN working group will raise it to the officials for environment. So elevating this to a much higher mechanism in the government bodies to pay a very strong attention to the conservation of wetlands, as well as the migratory waterbirds that is in this habitat. And at the same time, collectively, we explore opportunities for funding and partnership arrangements as like a platform today. So thank you very much once again for inviting us tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young, really appreciate it. And thanks for sticking with us to be able to finally get through and present. That was really useful and clear, so worth the wait. Really important also, thank you for sharing around the work that's been happening in ASEAN with the network on wetlands and migratory waterbird conservation, and the process there in terms of prioritization of sites and the nomination linked up to the working group. I think is very important and definitely something to use and build on as a process. And so something that I think we definitely like to talk to you more and other partners in ASEAN about as we move forward. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So we'll now move on to the next set of speakers that we have. We've got 3 representatives from civil society organizations. The first will be Dr. Spike Millington, who is the Vice President of the International Crane Foundation and also a former Chief Technical Advisor for the EU-China Biodiversity Program, and previously the Chief Executive for the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership. So a lot of experience there. He will be followed by Dr. Taj Munka, International Waterbird Census Coordinator and Senior Technical Officer with Wetlands International, plus also importantly the Chair of the Convention on Migratory Species Flyways Working Group. And then finally, the last in this session will be Dr. Jianbin Shi, Director of the Conservation Program for Wetlands with the Paulson Institute, their representative office in China. So with that, I pass over to you, Dr. Millington, for your remarks.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. I must say, I'm so happy to see so many old friends and colleagues on this webinar. It's fantastic. And I must also say, I'm really very excited that ADB is leading this initiative. I don't have a slideshow, you just have to watch me talking, sorry. I'm really happy to see ADB leading this initiative. I think it's really important, and I think it's really timely also, you know, following the UN General Assembly Biodiversity Summit a couple of weeks ago, and the commitment of many world leaders to put biodiversity conservation at the center of sustainable development strategies. And I'm really happy to hear that ADB is also doing that. And what Duncan presented is also very encouraging. And I think another important thing about ADB, where it adds value, in addition to what Duncan said, there are developing country members and developed country members at ADB. And the important thing is that they all share this migratory flyway. They share these migratory birds. And so in addition to countries like Mongolia and China, Southeast Asian countries, also developed country members and donors such as the US, Japan, Korea, Australia, they all have a very strong stake in this. So that makes me very optimistic that if we can bring all these together, it can really lead to some very remarkable progress. Another area where ADB definitely adds value is partners. So most of us in civil society organizations and also for EAAFP, the government partners are mostly with ministries of environment and forestry. But ADB, very importantly, has partners with the Ministry of Finance and other sectoral ministries such as water resources. And if we're really going to change the way these sustainable financing mechanisms work, we need to involve ministries of finance. So I'm very excited that we can get this kind of synergy between existing partners that we have in the technical ministries, and that ADB can bring significant added value through extra partners within the countries where they work. I think this is actually quite important. And then another point I wanted to make is that ADB is already working in a lot of these areas. We heard Ramesh talk about Greater Mekong Initiative, for instance, the Coral Triangle Initiative. And I would like to just highlight one where I see a particularly strong connection with where we at the International Crane Foundation work, and that's the Yangtze River Economic Belt Program, which is an ADB program that's based on a nature-based solutions approach, and includes wetland restoration, wetland conservation, as well as livelihood development. And I think this kind of thing, it would be very easy in this program to integrate migratory bird conservation, because at the heart of that program lies Poyang Lake, which is the largest freshwater lake in China, and the most important site for migratory waterbirds in the entire flyway. And with the flooding that happened this year in the Yangtze River, there was very negative effects, not just on livelihoods, but also on biodiversity. So working with this program to integrate migratory bird conservation and wetland restoration and conservation can be, a very significant opportunity. And I'm sure there are many other of these programs that ADB has in coastal areas and elsewhere that are already working in livelihood development and working biodiversity conservation, where we could integrate wetland conservation and migratory bird conservation. And hearing the presentations from Xiaoting and from Wolfram, it becomes very clear that if we really protect these wintering areas for, in this case, many migratory species, including all of the Siberian cranes, pretty much all of the oriental white storks, then we can develop collaboratively programs such as AFD and KFW have done, because those species winter in the Yangtze, and they're covering the breeding and stopover areas. And we also work in Arctic Russia in the breeding areas for Siberian cranes. So that way we can promote a whole of flyway approach. And Vina said this also, and Shufan also, for the coastal sites. So I'm happy to hear that that there's flexibility in the program. I think the approach that's outlined by Duncan, a programmatic approach that's adaptive, is very promising, and it's the way to go. For CSOs, what we really want from our partners, and particularly from government partners and intergovernmental organizations, is just good communication and good coordination. So, I think that this webinar is a brilliant start to that. I think you started off in exactly the right way. And as a representative of a civil society organization, I'd like to thank ADB for its inclusiveness in this webinar. And I hope that will continue as the program develops. For me, it's a very exciting program, and I'm very happy to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Spike, for your very kind and encouraging words about the program proposal and about the potential value added of ADB. And I guess certainly we would agree in terms of those being some comparative advantage of opportunities that we could bring forward in the program. But of course, very necessary that we all work together at the country levels and with CSO engagements to really make this effective and work. So we're looking forward to kind of leveraging with you and to take that integrated approach, which to be honest is something that ADB is really trying to push now, to move away from more sort of siloed and sectored approaches. And our own strategy 2030, which Duncan had mentioned briefly, very much pushes that agenda. So I think it's a positive platform to move forward with, and looking forward to working with you and the International Crane Foundation. So I'll keep moving us now into our last two speakers. So next we have Dr. Taj Munka from Wetlands International. I'll pass over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to people in Asia. Thank you very much for inviting Wetlands International as a CSO that's been involved in working with governments and NGOs across the region for the last several decades in Asia and the rest of the world. We really value the opportunity to provide our ideas on this very important and timely initiative. Having spoken just after Spike, who's really outlined the importance of this program, it's perhaps just for me to say that we as Wetlands International see great value in the ADB taking on this new role in bringing together their many activities existing in the region, but also adding value to the existing framework, which is the East Asian-Australasian Flyway partnership. And from our side, there are a few points that I might like to bring up here. The first is that we've been working with governments in China, in Southeast Asia, and across the Flyway, and looking at really how can we manage wetlands in a more sustainable way from mountains to the coast. So really taking a landscape approach and looking at smart solutions that ensure that we are dealing with today's problems, but as well as tomorrow's challenges in terms of climate change, sea level rise, so that where we are building management plans, they are meeting the needs both for species, migratory waterbirds in this case, but as well as the many millions of people that depend on these wetlands. And we've already heard the word building with nature. This is something that Wetlands International over the last many years has been trialing with governments in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and the Philippines as two examples. And this program is being upscaled now, and we are very keen to see how the ideas being developed and tested can be upscaled to ensure that we have a much larger network of sites that can be better managed for migratory waterbirds, but as well as for people. And this takes me to the next slide, which you've already seen. And this is the slide presented by David Stroud, who talked about the excellent work that was done using the information from the governments, from the Ramsar Convention, from Iowa, UNEP WCMC, a project called Windsor Wetlands that Wetlands International and BirdLife developed as a large UNEP GEF project that helped to bring together a lot of information for every species of waterbird in the African-Eurasian region. And this global tool could very easily be adapted to this region as well to cover the flyways of the East Asian region as well as Central Asian region. As you can see here from these boundaries for the species, these species really overlap a lot in their breeding and staging areas, and conserving them requires tools that...
Luca, sorry to interrupt you midstream. I just noticed your screen's not sharing there at the moment. So just if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a green button that says share screen.
See. Sorry.
That one.
Dr. Munker, my apology. I should have caught that earlier. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, sorry. Do you see the screen now?
Coming through now. If you can just press the button to go to the full screen mode, people will see it a little bit better. So
Yes.
the bottom right there. That's
okay.
That's it. Coming through clearly
Okay.
now. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I'd pressed it, but thanks for warning me. Well, we can jump through the first slides. I did mention about the river basin approach and the need for looking at site management that takes into consideration existing pressures as well as future issues related to climate change and sea level rise. And so I can skip through this slide, as well as I mentioned very briefly about the approach that we've been working with governments in the Philippines and Malaysia and Indonesia, and looking to upscale that over the coming years, working with partners to ensure that we have a very good, strong network of critically managed wetlands across the flyway. I then briefly showed you the slide that relates to the critical site network tool that's been developed for the African-Eurasian region as a global tool, which could be quite easily as a low-hanging fruit be extended to this flyway as well, so that governments, partners, development agencies have a single tool that shows the joint shared populations across these different flyways. Such a decision support tool could be quite a good way to target the 50 sites that are being currently proposed under the new initiative that ADB is outlined just now. And obviously this provides strategic support then to the development and expansion of the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership site network. As in CSO, we've been working very closely with governments and the CSO community and experts and interested people in monitoring waterbirds and their wetland habitats over the last many decades, which provides up-to-date information on waterbirds and wetlands, as well as the status of the wetlands, identifying threats, which allows then for timely action. And all this only works when there is regular capacity building at the local and national level in order to monitor waterbirds and wetlands and to support conservation action. This census is coordinated by Wetlands International, but at the national level is coordinated by governments in some countries, by NGOs in others, and has been a very successful program, but remains one that needs to be strengthened because the number of wetlands is clearly more than the current capacity of the groups that are involved in monitoring them. And the program mentioned by Shu Fen just before on the ASEAN Flyway Network has helped to start filling in some of the major gaps in the ASEAN region. The last thing I'd like to mention is that we really should see this program in the East Asian-Australasian Flyway as an opportunity not to reinvent the wheel and to take the lessons from other flyways. And there's a lot of good information available out there, and we can jumpstart this program quite easily by picking and choosing available information, adapting it for use in this program that is being proposed. And here I come back to the Flyway Training Kit, which was developed under a major program, the WINGZO Wetlands program for the African-Eurasian region. And there are some lessons to be learned on how that could be used in this flyway. There's a lot of other information out there which has already been agreed by governments and other partners, such as single species action plans, guidelines on how to deal with some of the big threats to species, such as power lines and wind farms, and really look at how we can take a broader flyway approach to supporting efforts at the national level, at the local level, in the context of this broader conservation need for migratory waterbirds and wetlands, and demonstrating once again that conserving migratory species can provide a good flagship for conservation of other biodiversity, but as well as the people who depend on these wetlands and clearly are closely linked to them. And we look forward to discussing further with the Asian Development Bank, with BirdLife International, and all the EAAFP partners and others who would like to see this moving forward. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Munker, for your presentation and support there again. It's very much appreciated. And you fully agree there's so much work that is there to be built on globally as well as within the Flyway itself. Lessons learned, good practices, existing agreements and guidelines, and that's exactly what we should be building on. So very much appreciate those words, and not the least, of course, in terms of the experience and your words around how critical it is for regular monitoring, because without that data, it's very difficult for us to move forward. I remember our own project experiences working in the Sanjiang Plains in China, seeking to improve monitoring, but also the challenges of being able to interpret local monitoring data in the absence of good critical data across the broader Flyway. You know, year to year, there's a lot of variation, so it's quite challenging. So very important issue. So very much appreciate your remarks and look forward to working with you more. Now we'll come, and again, I apologize, we've run a bit behind schedule, but we have one speaker to go, Dr. Jianbin Shi from the Paulson Institute, who will speak next. Following that, I'll pass over to Mr. Warren Evans from ADB, who will provide us with some closing remarks. And then I'll just a reminder for everyone as well. We do expect that many of you have got further questions, and many of you have been putting questions into the chat box. After the formal closure of the webinar, we'll actually stay online for about another 30 minutes, and members of the team presenting today, particularly Duncan Lang from ADB and colleagues from BirdLife International, will stay on for some further Q&A. So anyone who's wishing to join the discussions, and that'll be an important next step actually for us to think about how we can move the program forward. So that will follow in a few minutes, just to let you know. So keep any questions coming on that front. So now, Dr. Shi, can I pass over to you? Your presentation's up on the screen, so over to you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for introducing and inviting me to speak here today. So I will briefly introduce our institute and its work in relation to the proposed regional flyway program. And the institute, the Paulson Institute, was founded in 2011 and by Henry Paulson, and who was the 74th Secretary of Treasury and the former Chief Executive of Goldman Sachs. And the institute is a think and do tank, and we believe that the most pressing economy and environmental issues can only be solved when China and the US are work together and in a complementary ways. And so our mission is thus to foster a US-China relationship that serves to maintain global order in a rapidly evolving world. And in order to achieve this mission, the institute has set up 4 key programs, including the Green Finance Center and the Nature Conservation Program and the Mayor Training Program, and the Paulson Prize for Certificates in China. And as one of the key programs within the institute, the Nature Conservation Program has focused on wetland and coastal wetland conservation and management in the past few years. And we are working at both the policy level and the on-the-ground project levels. And in the past few years, and one of the key work and achievement and from the Nature Conservation Program is development and implementation of the blueprint for coastal wetland conservation and management in China. That is a partnership among the government agencies and academic institutions and the CSOs. So the blueprint project analyze the status, the current status, and the gap, the conservation gap on coastal wetland in China, and analyze the economic values of the ecosystem services provided by coastal wetland in China, and also identifies the most important and also the needed conservation protection coastal wetlands and for migratory waterbirds along EAAF in China. And the project put forward and implemented for recommendations, policy recommendations, and for better conservation and management of coastal wetland in China. And the findings and the recommendations were reported to the top-level leadership of Chinese government and also distributed widely among the public and academics. So well, we can see that since then, I forgot to move the slides. That is the blueprint project, and the red set is the key set, which were identified by the blueprint project as the very important set for migratory waterbirds. And we can see that, and there has been a shift in the policies in recent years in China, which is in favor of the coastal wetland conservation and management. And there are just some examples to show the policy has been developed and evolved during the past few years in relation to the conservation and the management of coastal wetland in China. I don't want to repeat that. And also we are happy to see that and more CSOs have been engaged and initiated efforts in coastal wetland conservation and management in China. And we can see that a social climate and which is conducive to the coastal wetland conservation and is emerging in China, which can be a sound foundation and for the proposed flyway, regional flyway program. As to the opportunities and the challenges towards the program, I don't want to repeat what the other people have said and in relation to the challenges and opportunities. Of course, there are many opportunities and challenges and facing these programs. And the first, I just wanted to say that, and the methodologies used in the blueprint project and also the experience obtained from the blueprint project and could be easily replicated in the other Southeast Asia countries along EAAF and to get the sound evidence base for the highlighted biodiversity conservation issues or to protect the critical coastal wetland along the EAAF. And also this exercise could be carried out for the freshwater wetland as well, not only the coastal wetland. And the second, I just wanted to mention that we should possibly pay attention to the climate change and interaction and between among the biodiversity conservation and climate change and livelihood. As we can see that the coastal blue carbon and can provide a chance to conserve biodiversity, mitigate climate change, and also provide livelihood. And we and the partners have recently completed studies on the conservation and management of mangrove in China, and which indicates that and mangrove conservation and restoration and could become a new bridge to link China with the other Southeast Asian countries, particularly those Southeast countries with rich mangrove forest along the road and the belt, the belt and the road. And as we heard that the EAAFP actually has provided good opportunities and a platform to develop such kind of regional flyway program, as the doc mentioned earlier. I don't want to repeat. And one more thing I wanted to mention that, and the regional flyway program itself is a good opportunity and a chance. And also it can bring very important political benefits to the region. And because such a regional cooperation and can build and bring trust and understanding of the shared natural heritages and the shared responsibilities among the countries and the regions and the communities. And such improved trust and understanding and can act as the buffer and for some like the intense buffers for international relationships during the time of intense in other policy areas. So we can work on this like the conservation biodiversity issues easily and cooperative. And the last but not least, I wanted to mention that the CBD COP15 and the Romster COP14 present a good opportunity as mentioned. And the Policy Institute and other partners have recently completed and released a report called the Financial Niche, Closing the Biodiversity Financing Gap. This report analyzed, developed the economic cases for biodiversity and analyzed the economy values and the amount currently spent on biodiversity conservation and what is needed for biodiversity conservation. That is the global financing gap. And the report also put forward recommendations to close up the financing gap. And the main point from the report is that the gap obviously is very big, but it can be filled up. And the government should take actions at a large scale to fill this gap. But the private sectors and other international development agencies like ADB and other financing organizations can also play a pivotal role in filling up these gaps. And this report, I think, could be used as reference and for the negotiations at the COP15 and to develop the national biodiversity financing plan. So if you're interested in this report, and this report can be downloaded from this website as mentioned. So I think this initiative is very important and also comes at a very right time. And we will support and fully this initiative. And thank you very much for ADB and the BioLife International for leading this development of this initiative. And we are looking forward to work closely with ADB and the other partners and to development and implementation of this important initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shi. And again, really appreciate your support and offer for close collaboration. I'm sure the Financing Nature report is very timely, and it's one that we'll all be very, very interested in. I see Patricia's given a good endorsement from BirdLife International. They're saying it's fabulous, so definitely a good recommendation for everyone to have a look at it. And I think very critical and links also to one of the reasons why we'd like to put our support and efforts behind this Flyway and program is really the high level commitment obviously needs to be mobilized there, and also Dr. Shi, what you've mentioned around leadership and also the potential to leverage with CBD COP next year in terms of getting support for this initiative will be very important. And then looking to mobilize finance for really scaled up investments will be critical. So thank you again. Now, look, thank you so much to everyone for your participation in this webinar. And I do apologize, we have gone quite over time. And I guess looking back, we were very ambitious in terms of getting everyone involved. And as this was sort of the first webinar and launch of these discussions, I think we wanted to be very inclusive. And I do appreciate that so many governments, development partners and CSOs have joined today. And it's been very, very encouraging. So really appreciate that support. We look forward to working closely with you. Now, to wrap up today, I'd like to invite Warren Evans. Warren is the Special Project Facilitator at ADB. Many of you also might know Warren as former lead on environment issues at the World Bank for many years. So I'm sure you're familiar with Warren. I'll pass to Warren. And then for those of you who would like to stay on the line for more discussion on this, we're happy to stay on for about 30 minutes after the call. Over to you, Warren. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. First, I want to, Wu Chong asked me to, again, send his regrets. He really wanted to be able to stay on here, but he's been called into something that's kind of critical and urgent. And so his apologies and my apologies for being a poor replacement. I've taken a lot of notes and was trying to figure out how to close this and decided that I would take some liberties and give some of my viewpoints that most of which have been emphasized in the various presentations today. But first, I want to thank all the participants and speakers, and particularly the team that developed the Flyway Initiative concept in this webinar. I think this has been fantastic. The various speakers highlighted a number of challenges. They also showed some very important success stories regarding conservation of several key areas and existing partnerships and technical assistance that supports these initiatives. For example, I had never heard of the Wolong Gate Lake initiative supported by AFD, and it's an excellent demonstration of combining investment, political will, and prioritizing biodiversity to restore nature and generate economic benefits. So congratulations for all of the success stories that have been described today. They're very key. But as we all know, as global and other assessments show over and over, we're winning some important battles, such as the success stories that have been talked about today, but we're basically losing the war at a growing pace and scale in terms of biodiversity conservation and protection. The international agreements are important. I've been around for a long time, and I'm an advocate of international agreements, but is anybody really surprised that none of the Aichi targets are being met? I never expected them to. And I think it's a good example of why we need to go way, way beyond international agreements to achieve what we're all talking about achieving. So sustainable conservation in general, but I'll use the flyway we're talking about in particular, we've got to be talking about scale and transparency at all levels, from bottom up to top down. It's got to be sustainable. We can't do one-off initiatives. And we've all seen way too many of those happen in the past. And so let me talk about scale for a minute. Scale and innovation in financing are key. We're not talking about interesting grants. We do lots of those, and they're highly successful, but they don't achieve scale often. We're talking about substantial, sustained investment by a range of countries and institutions. I was interested to see that KfW is supporting biodiversity conservation. We need to get all the key bilateral developed donor countries, what we used to call donor countries, to participate in a collective way. And I congratulate both AFD and KfW and all the other players that are providing financial support for these initiatives. But we need to all come together. And in a flyway project like this, we've got Australia, we've got Korea, we've got Japan. They all need to be at the table with other interested potential donor countries and other partners. And those other sources, Ms. Xiaoting mentioned climate finance. Yes, absolutely. We need to be looking at those kind of sources of finance, and including private sector and foundations. And I was really happy to see the Paulson Institute wrap this up, because Hank Paulson's been a real champion of environment for a long, long time. And I think they're doing phenomenal work. But we need foundations like his and many others to come to the table as well. Scale in partnership. Now, this is something that I think ADB has really demonstrated leadership on. Ramesh mentioned the Greater Mekong Subregion Program, and Srini Acha and Bob Dobius I think are still on this. They know the challenges they're a couple of old timers like me. They know the challenges in getting governments, development finance partners, private sector, civil society, all on board for the long haul. And I think ADB has really demonstrated leadership in this area. The GMS program has done phenomenal work, and it has lasted. It has shown lasting power. So it can be done, but nobody can do it alone. So coordination at the macro level is absolutely essential. The international financiers need to come together. Governments need to come together. CSOs need to come together. I've often said that CSOs are probably the most competitive group of anybody I've worked with. They've got to come together. And I think that BirdLife has demonstrated some real leadership by bringing, what used to be the IBAs that were about birds, now they're about biodiversity. And they brought a lot of CSOs together to agree on that. foundations need to come together, and academia. All the key stakeholders need to come together. In my experience, the real kiss of death for a partnership that like the one we're talking about is ownership. You can't own this. No individual institution can own this. Co-ownership and a welcoming approach for new partners that can make a real commitment and contribution is the key. So don't establish a partnership and close the door, make it open all the time, but make sure that partners have something to offer and that they meet their commitments to actually contribute. The other thing I'll mention about partnership is they're not easy to manage. So the kind of initiative that you guys are talking about will require some real high-level commitments to effective management. And it can be done. It's been done before. Scale and capacity. There were several speakers that talked about the need to build capacity at the local level, at the national level, the regional level. We've got to invest in capacity, scale in research, outreach, consensus building, scale in development. You can't do what you're talking about doing in the Flyway without having it be integral to the development process, sustainable development process. So this is absolutely essential, and that's where I think ADB and other finance development organizations can really provide support. Scale in political support. I think that the upcoming CBD is a great opportunity. My experience is that everybody wants something positive to say when they get up on the stage at the CBD. So if we can feed them a good storyline and use that to get them to be effective partners in this initiative, then let's do it. But we need that political support. And then finally, scale in audit, monitoring, and feedback. You've got to have the kind of feedback mechanism so that adjustments can be made in a timely way, in a real-time way, and at the scale needed to make sure that the program succeeds. Now, having said that, I think we've got a lot to build upon in this particular case. You've got existing partnerships. We heard from a number of them. They're doing great work. We need to build on that. There are a number of existing initiatives at the ground level and the regional level. We need to build on that. And there's other regions' experience to build on. We heard about some of the other flyway projects and wetlands projects, conservation projects. Duncan mentioned the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund. We need to build on the experiences of all those initiatives. And there's also a lot of really good existing research at the big picture level, such as the BirdLife IBAs, to very local level from many of the conservation projects that were discussed today. Finally, I think that we can build on and must build on the growing awareness of many of the populations of the countries in the Flyway, but more broadly globally, of the value of biodiversity and ecosystem services, the growing loss of critical biodiversity and ecosystem services, the linkages to climate change mitigation and resilience, and the demand of those populations for actions. And we need to take advantage of that. But that then goes back to the need for good outreach, good communications, and so on. I'm really happy to see ADB taking a 1ADB approach in scaling up its biodiversity program and reaching out to partners like BirdLife International and others. The last several years, and as Bruce mentioned, I was in the World Bank for a long time. I was in ADB for a long time. I've seen a decline in support for biodiversity conservation from many of the international finance institutions and bilateral donor countries. And I think ADB is playing a key leadership role in reviving the focus on this, in supporting member governments' initiatives such as the East Asian-Australasian Flyway program. And my final point is that I think there's a growing opportunity for development agencies to contribute to biodiversity conservation as a truly integral element of sustainable development. For ADB, a critical challenge, this isn't a new challenge, and I can say it's not just with ADB, I think it's with all MDBs, certainly was with the World Bank when I was there, is to learn how to work as partners with CSOs. We're pretty good at working as partners with governments. We're not so great at working as partners with CSOs, particularly at the scale that I was talking about earlier. So I challenge and invite my colleagues at ADB to focus on this challenge going forward. How can we really become clearly partners with CSOs and others so that we can all come together with equal seats at the big table to make these things work? With that, I'm going to thank you again for the opportunity and wish you the best of luck. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Warren. Great remarks, really thought-provoking, and I think a big challenge for all of us to take that forward, including the team at ADB in partnership with others, the CSOs, and really live up to you know, the spirit and the points that you've just given us there. So really, thank you. It's a great finish to the webinar. Now, look, it's been a pretty intensive session. But we do want to still keep the option open for a little bit more, let's say, informal Q&A. And any questions that we haven't been able to cover, of course, regarding the presentation that Duncan, along with Gary and Vinna from BirdLife, had presented to you earlier. So the webinar sort of formally ends here with Warren's closing remarks, but for anyone that would like to stay on, and of course everyone's welcome to stay on if you'd like to, but anyone finishing, of course, that's understandable. What we'll do in the next session is, in a couple of moments, Mark Bazayan from ADB, he's been keeping track of some of the comments that people have been making in the chat box during the session. So Mark's going to share his screen, and then for up to, I'd say, probably the next 25 minutes, I'll be happy to sort of moderate a session with Duncan, with Gary and Vinna, available to answer questions. And of course, it's a free session also for other people to come in and speak. There's, you know, no real boundaries there. Happy to hear from people informally. So we can move to that. And just in case you haven't caught it already in the chat box, as Mark has said a couple of times, we will be sharing all of the presentations back with this group. We'll also put some notes together in terms of key messages and outcomes, and then we'll be seeking to work very closely with everyone in defining some next steps and follow-up discussions. So thanks again from the entire ADB team. And with that, concludes. And Mark, we'll go to the next session. Maybe while you're putting your screen up, of course, anyone who's staying on, you want to take, maybe we can have a couple of short minutes break also. So if people want to run out for a short break, grab a drink of water, they have time for that as well. Does that sound okay?
Bruce, just let me know if that's showing up on the screen. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, that's coming through.
Okay. I might just mention, Bruce, I think we had several questions through on whether the PowerPoints can be shared after the webinar. So just as a general comment to everyone, what we're thinking of doing is we'd like to request all speakers to please provide just a couple of paragraphs, maybe just a half-page reflection of this webinar and your thoughts on moving forward. And we will compile that together with a list of the participants, the webinar recording, and the PowerPoint presentations as a very simple package to send out to participants. So on that note, speakers, to all speakers, if you're comfortable with that, please send me your final draft PowerPoint presentations that you're happy to go out publicly. And we'll send that out. In terms of contacts, I think between Doug, I think between you and I, we have the entire network covered in terms of the EAAFP focal network contacts, as well as the list of email contacts that ADB sent this Zoom invitation to. So I think we're covered in terms of contacts to sending it out to everyone. Yes, so that covers that point, I think, on data sharing to everyone. Bruce, from that, we had, these were the main points that I managed to catch going through the chat box here. So I'll just, having addressed the one on the PowerPoint sharing, that leaves us as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 others there. Apologies to everyone if I've missed a point, an important point in the chat box, but those were the ones I caught. So Bruce, over to you, please, for moderation and in case of further comments and observations from people. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thanks very much, Mark. And I expect that some more questions may come through. I see one now. Yeah, there's a few more questions coming through, so we can maybe add those to the list as we go through. Perhaps maybe to kick off, could I invite maybe Duncan, Gary and Vinna, maybe to just come back perhaps for your initial thoughts on some of these questions being raised at this stage, and I'm happy to support as well. Particularly, maybe Duncan, this is also for you, Mark. First question, useful to learn how ADB managed to mobilize and bring together all of this, and what are the anticipated next steps? I think that's probably an important one to talk to. Duncan, maybe you want to share some points there. Okay. I would say from the outset also, bringing this together has really been a collaborative effort, and we really do have to thank a couple of key partners, in particular BirdLife International, who have worked very closely with us and have also been discussing this for, I think, throughout this year in terms of issues around flyways and really getting us enthused also to be able to support the program. Patricia Zarita and now Doug and Vinna working closely with the concept and presentation. But also we do need to really thank, of course, Doug Watkins, CEO of the East Asia-Australasian Flyway Partnership, who's given a lot of guidance in putting this together, and that's also helped us to sort of map the network of other actors and bring things together. But Duncan, can I pass to you for a couple of comments?
Sure. Well, I echo your points there, Bruce. This has really been a very collaborative exercise. I mean, we've been working with BirdLife particularly for, I'd say, a year on this in one way or the other. And so it's very exciting to actually be here to talk about this now, because it's one of those things you always hope will happen. And so here we are. We've been doing a lot of work with them and in consultation, as Bruce said, with Doug and a number of other key organizations and individuals to bring together the concept that we've presented today. It's definitely a collaborative exercise. It's definitely very open. We're here to listen to what feedback we get from everybody to further develop this. This is certainly, like a first draft, if you like, of our concept. So as Mark said, we will, issue the sort of summary of the event and take homes from participants after this. Then I think, well, our plan will be to start, continuation of the consultation process for developing the Flyway partnership, our program. And while we're doing that, we'll also look to try and secure some funding internally so that we can actually really then focus on the development phase, because we need money to do that properly. But definitely this is just the first, this is the beginning, if you like, and I think we'll probably try and run similar outreach sessions, punctuated throughout the remainder of the year and moving into next year to get that further feedback from yourselves, so that we can kind of refine down the elements we include. And that's, I think, our broad approach. But maybe I should pass over to Vinna, because I can see he's just popped up about how we were able to bring this together from a BirdLife perspective as well, because they've been, key partners for us in this. Thanks.
Thank you, Duncan. I think it's interesting, certainly from a BirdLife perspective, looking at it in terms of working with a development bank like ADB. That hasn't, certainly in Asia, been the traditional sort of approach. But I think increasingly we've become aware that given the scale of the challenges that we face, and given the given the need to sort of mobilize not just civil society, but also sort of governments, development banks, academia, but this collective picture that sort of Warren referred to in his conclusions, that collective endeavor is something that we recognize as being increasingly sort of important and necessary if we're going to advance conservation along the flyways. So from our perspective, when the opportunity came to sort of talk to ADB about this and to sort of talk about the development of an idea which would involve a development bank really coming in with its sort of muscle, but with delivery on the ground by governments, by NGOs, by academia, that combination was a hugely exciting sort of prospect and one that we felt that we could not sort of pass up in terms of an opportunity to develop. So certainly from our perspective, I think that was the key driver. When the opportunity came to sort of have that conversation with ADB, that was really our sort of motivation. And I'm glad that we've come to a point where we've got a basic idea in place. But this idea will need developing, so it will need sort of further work. It will need us to sort of have further conversations with different parties along the flyway, the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership, very important, Wetlands International, the Paulson Institute, AFT. These are all sort of partners that we will now have to sort of talk to and come up with something that really sort of works in terms of delivering conservation across the flyway. Obviously, different organizations have different strengths within that broad framework. It's all about identifying the different strengths of the different partners and coming up with a composite sort of picture, which really involves leveraging on those individual strengths and deliver with the backing of ADB and hopefully other multilaterals and bilaterals supporting this. So that would be that would be the way we sort of look at it. But again, to underscore that point that Warren made very well, this cannot be achieved by any single institution. It has got to be a collective endeavor. Obviously at BirdLife, we work through a partnership, but this will have to be not just BirdLife partnership, but BirdLife and beyond that, a broader sort of collaboration with governments, other civil society organizations, and of course with support of ADB and others.
Can I possibly jump in, Bruce, very quickly?
Go ahead, Patricia. Over to you.
So I just wanted to, first of all, thank the bank, because you guys are, and as Warren said, you are showing the leadership. Right now, we have seen a very steep decline on the interest and the support of the multilateral organizations to nature. And I think that the pandemic is showing us that this is the right moment to really reignite that interest and that support. And you saw from the examples from both AFT and KFW, and as you guys, ADB presented as well, with little investment, but with collaboration and with political will and bringing the right partners to the place, we can make things happen fairly quickly and very successfully. And in that sense, nature is incredibly generous. The minute that we give it a chance, it actually comes back, and it comes back not only benefiting species, but benefiting us as human societies. So what I wanted to stress is that this is, for us, an initiative that means bringing everybody together. We at BirdLife have, and I was saying this to someone on the chat, in our DNA, collaboration is very much imprinted. We are a partnership of organizations, and we very much want this to be an initiative that helps us all put our shoulder together, because we all realize, as Dina said, we cannot do it alone. But I think it is an important element to think about the timing. Not only we have the CBD COP next year and the Ramsar COP both hosted in China next year, but also the huge opportunity of riding on this greater awareness that people have because of the horrible pandemic that we're living right now, of how important it is to restore our relationship with nature and how nature takes care of us if we take care of it. So I think there is, that the ingredients are on the table. It's just a matter of how we make sure that we come together and build up this dream that is actually going to turn back in huge benefits to all of us.
Great. Fully agree, Patricia, and both Vina and Duncan, look, great points. I think, obviously the partnership aspect of this and building on this, rich framework of work that's already been done, but then also this unique opportunity with, nature really being at the height of everyone's attention at the moment, and with the events coming up with the CBD and Ramsar, as you've said, Patricia. It's something we've got to capitalize on, I think, honestly. And to answer just very briefly, a couple of the questions, sort of bringing a few things together in the chat about next steps. I think something that we'll work on and like to work on with other partners is the roadmap for taking this forward. What are the key next steps? What are the key milestones? The follow-up events that we'll need to have. And of course, we'll need to do a rich stakeholder mapping for who should be involved in that, and the review of activities. We are looking at a phased approach with trying to mobilize some technical assistance to help us develop up the program more in the first phase before we go to implementation. But I think we can map that out together, and we very much appreciate I think the support from other partners also to do that mapping work. And I see in the chat also colleagues, for example, I see Baz Hughes has asked about WWF involvement, and their new Asian Flyways program, which of course we'll need to work with carefully. ADB has an MOU with WWF. Actually, they're a very strong partner of ours going back over the last 20 years, actually one of our great partners. So that and many others will need to be working closely together, and of course with the countries. So that's something we'll work on and share with everyone. Now I want to create some space for some others to come in, and I've been getting a couple of requests. Qingfeng Zhang wanted to make a couple of comments, and then might come back to a few other issues in the chat. Also, anyone who'd like to speak, because this is an open session, please do just put in the chat, I'd like to speak, and I'll give you the floor.
Bruce, may I just step in quickly? I do apologize. I can't see the chat box because I've got this up on the screen. So apologies for my IT skills. Can I make a very quick comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Bruce. I would just like to sincerely acknowledge Professor Lei Guangchun. Just coming back to the first question in the first bullet point here, how did we do this? It was actually Professor Lei Guangchun that provided the very first early zero draft program for this webinar. So the credit and acknowledgement goes to him for that. We then worked together with the whole team, from us, from BirdLife, from the EAAFP Center for EAAFP Studies, and also Doug Watkins and his team at the East Asian-Australasian Flyway Partnership Secretariat to put this agenda together. So thank you to Professor Lei Guangchun, who unfortunately could not be with us here today, but is being represented instead by Deputy Director Dr. Liu. And again, it's been very much a team effort. Thank you, Bruce. That's the only point I wish to make. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for mentioning that, Mark. That's really important.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark and Bruce.
I will transfer this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Liu. Also, I take this opportunity. Of course, I want to thank one of the partners and also speakers to share the insights and also the knowledge this afternoon. To follow the remarks from Patricia, I think the number one actions we need to take is probably need to form the framework partnership. If that is possible, the next few weeks or the months. And then we can see what are the key elements we need to build in this program. Of course, the current proposal prepared by Duncan and others is a good start point. And then with that, we will need to formulate what are the key elements for this $3 or $5 billion US for future investment. And same time, we also can reach out to see which DMCs can be looping on table as a first shortlist DMC. This is the number one point. Second one is I also share the view from the Spark very, very much. I think from the ADB side, today is a very good milestone progress. We have 2 DG from the 2 regional departments attend this kickoff, and also they show their commitment. And then the good chance is, for example, for PRC and Mongolia, right, we started the CPS. And the number of the DMCs in the Southeast Asia department, right, they also started the CPS as well. So how we can strategically incorporate this into the CPS process, and also to have the consultations with our counterpart, Ministry of Finance. That is very critical. I think particularly for CPS for PRC and Mongolia, very, very critical time already. For PRC, biodiversity conservation, of course, is one of the key pillars. That no doubt we can incorporate this in the CPS and elevate the discussion with the mutual finance. This is the number 2. Number 3 is collective doubts. You know, so many things happening just the last few months, and we know 2021 we call is the year of the nature. Not only the COP 15 and also the Ramsar Convention, and of course we know the UN also has a sustainable food system summit. You know, that also going to collect the how we can balance the nature and also the human, right? Because we know agriculture and the food system is still the key driver forces for the biodiversity losses for the last 14 years. So question now, for number of the key initiatives right, we work on it. Number 1 is, of course, is the natural capital lab. Right, we work with Stanford University, Alibaba, NDRC, mutual finance. And of course, is a number of the agencies also outside of the PRC. Definitely for those key elements, Bruce and Patricia, you know, the 3 key elements we incorporate in that lab. 1 is natural resources accounting, 2 is eco compensation, 3 is innovative financing, green development funds, those type of financing tools. One of them also quite relevant for today's Flyway initiative. Of course, we also know that the Policy Institute was recently produced this report, Financing Nature, also very, very inspiring. Now I know the person was the treasury in the US and also reached out to so many commercial banks. So I think better we can loop in the one of the initiative together and the types of resources to support the Flyway initiative. Probably stop here. And these, we can list a number of the key actions. And then when we meet with our Vice President Sayi, we can propose to VP Sayi how we take the follow-up actions toward the preparation of the COP 15s. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks a lot, Jingfeng. So yeah, good points there. And maybe to pick up on one thing, your first comment there around, you know, sort of essentially proposing that we establish a, you know, multi-agency, multi-partner working group to take this forward. I think that's a really good suggestion. So that's something that we could work together, and particularly with some of the small group of partners, you know, BirdLife and the East Asia Flyway partnership, to see how we could constitute that as an open group, but also with some core organizations involved to try and move it forward. So we can pick that up after this discussion to see how we can move it. Now, there's a few other questions in the chat which hadn't come onto Mark's list. So I just want to highlight a couple of those. Now, I'm not sure we're going to get time to go through all of these, but I just want to flag a couple, and then if maybe Duncan or Gary have any quick responses or others. And I also see Alvin Lopez had specifically asked to take the floor, so I want to pass also to Alvin. Couple of things, let me just go to the list there. Oh, I think Mark's got a few things on his screen there now as well. So how to ensure the effectiveness of a targeted project in the sense that targeted habitat, wetlands, are ecologically connected, say across the coastal areas in China or across the flyway. So I think that is a critical issue in terms of key sites and how they're linked across the network. So that was one. There's also reference to World Heritage sites, and I guess there is, you know, how would they be integrated? There's also another question in terms of, you know, how do we link these or this initiative to the broader process around multilateral environmental agreements and have it, you know, be referenced and reported back in those. Maybe I could just ask for a few, you know, quick comments or responses to those three, and then I'll pass the floor after that to Alvin for some additional comments. Maybe Gary or Vina, did you want to come in on those? Or of course, anyone. So open floor, open mic night.
Vina will be better positioned
Yeah,
to answer.
sure. So can you hear me?
Yeah, coming through. Thanks, Vina.
Okay, brilliant. I think in terms of the question on and the question is, how do you ensure the effectiveness of a targeted project in a sense that targeted habitat wetland is ecologically connected? I think the important thing here, and this really comes down to the planning right at the beginning. So when we decide that when we decide on the sites that we actually sort of select, when we decide on the strategies that we adopt in relation to each of these sites, I think that's in that initial sort of conception. We've just got to make sure that we're thinking more broadly. You know, we're not just thinking about interventions at those sites, which will obviously be critical when you look at things like livelihoods and so on, but thinking more broadly. What does conservation at this site actually mean in terms of the broader flyway? What does conservation, for example, at the Gulf of Mortimer in Myanmar mean in terms of supporting species, sort of supporting some of these species further up the flyway? What does conservation in Thailand mean in terms of what this will mean for birds coming from Hong Kong? So thinking holistically, thinking in a way that thinking about interventions so that they don't just benefit that site, but benefit the entire flyway, and just making sure that in the planning stage of things, and when we're thinking about specific interventions, we are looking at it with that holistic sort of framework, so that the project in its design, in the design itself, comes across as something that is benefiting the entire flyway, as opposed to not just that site and the values of that site. So that would be my sort of response to that. Looking at the other ones.
Bruce, I don't suppose I could just flag up the World Heritage one, could I?
Yeah, of course, Gary. Yeah, go ahead.
Say it. So it feels a bit naughty doing it, but I know that there's several people on this call that know a lot more about World Heritage than me, and I wondered, is it possible for me to just ask Nicola Crockford to comment? Would that be okay?
Oh, of course, yeah. Hopefully Nicola will be amenable.
Yeah, Nicola.
Hi, thanks. It's been a really inspiring morning at our end. I guess it's afternoon at your end. Yes, so this World Heritage inscription is a really exciting proposition, of course. It seems to raise the political profile of sites more than any other designation and give stronger protection. And I was lucky to be present at the World Heritage Committee meeting last July in Baku, where the inscription happened of the Phase 1 China Yellow Sea Coast World Heritage Site. And amidst the euphoria there, an idea that sprung up and sort of spread like wildfire amongst participants was the idea of serial transboundary World Heritage Sites. So, of course, we already have a serial transboundary site in coastal wetlands in terms of the Wadden Sea, which is a single site shared between Denmark, Netherlands and Germany. But this was going beyond that to having the idea of chains of sites like pearls in a necklace that on their own wouldn't necessarily meet World Heritage criteria, but collectively would meet World Heritage criteria as being the key sites that, for example, a bird like the spoonbill sandpiper might depend on. Even I remember Australia, there was a banquet hosted by China to celebrate, and Australia stood up there and said, right, well, we're going to go back and reevaluate our sites to think about what we could put forward for that kind of nomination. So it seems to me, you know, having experienced the amount of work it takes to do a nomination, quite apart from then going on and doing the proper management, I mean, it seems to be that this ADB proposal is absolutely tailor-made for facilitating that kind of innovative approach. And that kind of approach apparently has been taken before, particularly in cultural World Heritage sites. So yeah, be interested to hear other people's views on it. I mean, supposing you were going to take spoonbill sandpiper, I mean, I know that there's already discussion in Russia of making the breeding grounds in Chukotka of the spoonbill sandpiper World Heritage Site, and that could be combined with the existing nomination in China, and then with Myanmar, Gulf of Matama, with Sanadia, Bangladesh. Well, I think it's now outside your region, but anyway. Yeah, lots of exciting possibilities there.
Thanks, Nicola. No, that's a pretty exciting prospect. And I think one of the things that we might want to kind of work into this, and particularly I think in the lead up to some of the high level events where there's a lot of political opportunity, is sort of bringing these discussions in terms of how we leverage this and political commitments to try and make some of those things move forward. I can see us doing a lot of networking and high-level consultations over the next 12 months on this. So it'd be good to kind of, you know, discuss that further in terms of how well we might be able to take it forward. I know a lot of us would be happy to take this conversation forward throughout the day. In fact, the other night with Gary and Vina and Duncan, we planned an hour meeting. We ended up spending 3, which was great. It just went by very quickly. But we probably want to focus in on a couple more things. I know a couple of other people did want to take the floor. Alvin Lopez next, and then maybe if there's any other hands to go up for a couple of final remarks. And then of course we'll take this forward. We'll wrap up the notes as Mark had said, and any of the questions we haven't been able to come to now, we can weave that into the final reporting from the event and into the next steps. I'll pass over to you, Alvin.
Okay, thanks, Bruce, and thanks all as well. I mean, this has been a wonderful discussion, a lot of good ideas, and so good to see this partnership, sort of wide partnership moving forward. I mean, a lot of effort has gone into the planning and was part of the team, so it's really good to see this discussion. I just wanted to make 3 specific points here. I think firstly, I just wanted to thank these participants, I mean, on behalf of the Southeast Asia Department again, the input from Shufan from the ASEAN Flyway Network, and also from Cambodia. I mean, that was excellent. And I'm based in Cambodia, so when I sort of get back there, we'll take this discussion further and look forward to moving this forward. I think the second point is, I think, a point which Ramesh and also Warren sort of emphasized on, and we'd like to really remind the team, I mean, everyone here, that ADB already has a lot of existing institutional frameworks set up, like the regional cooperation framework in the Greater Mekong sub-region, which has been going on for a long time with a lot of investment support as well. So and the current program, again, the new program, Srini's online, I see as well, on the climate change and environment sustainability program includes biodiversity conservation as well as regional connectivity as part of the program. So there's a lot of opportunities to even look at interventions through these programs. One of the initiatives which Ramesh mentioned this morning was the IMTGT, the Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle, again, specifically has in their strategic priorities looking at basically migratory species. Surprisingly, it's there as one of the strategic priorities, and yet they haven't moved forward on that. I think, again, a team like this, given guidance and providing some input to them on how to get that into the agenda. I mean, there is a platform which is already institutionalized to help take that forward. So there's a lot of opportunity in that regard as well. And the third point I wanted to make is basically we've heard clearly a lot of presentations from PRC today. And that's also very obvious because, as you know, ecological civilization and sort of green investments are really high on the Chinese government agenda. And it's really, really being driven over there. Whereas that may not be the same case in Southeast Asia, really. So again, finding opportunities on how we can actually effectively move forward in Southeast Asia to get these investments. Historically, ADB has been really an infrastructure investment bank. And now moving again into green financing, ecological infrastructure, nature-based solutions, try and use those sort of investment opportunities for Southeast Asia. Once we have identified target sites, and we'll need all your support, all the partners to basically convince the relevant governments as well to look at even green investments along the critical sites. And from against bankable projects like that, you might have opportunities to push this agenda further and eventually get into what the ADB pipelines of investments using nature-based solutions. So that sort of angle from a Southeast Asian perspective might be more effective than typically going just towards capacity building or things like that. So I just wanted those 3 points and leave it that for others to come in. Thank you.
Bruce, could I just make a follow-on comment there?
Go ahead, Doug. Gary, sorry, over to you.
It's great, and it's nice to meet you virtually. I've been following your stuff on Development Asia and read some of your blog pieces. Like, tremendous work that you're doing, and it did strike me that was one part of the bank that would be really nice to, or one initiative of the bank that would be really nice to reach into and try and integrate with. Congratulations on your work. And all to say that I'm not an expert on Asia, but have worked in the Bretton Woods institutions widely for 20 years or more. And, you know, one of the reasons why I think this is an incredibly exciting moment is that I think ADB is in quite an interesting, frankly, leadership position here, in that you've got, I think, quite an enlightened board and staff, and you've got a set of countries that are at least open to some of these ideas, where you're leading the charge on shifting, you know, as you say, institutions that were set up for, you know, post-war infrastructure that are now becoming enlightened, forward-looking institutions that are investing in all of the good things that you just mentioned. And as such, you know, I see the run-up to and the event of the CBD COP within the region next year as a tremendous opportunity, both for ADB, frankly, to be recognized for that, but also to promote, you know, all of those good things on the world stage in a way that other institutions might pick them up. You know, I think you are in quite an interesting leadership role at this point, you know, and I think if we can get what we've been discussing in the topic of, in the subject of this call, you know, advanced in a way that the real headlines of what can be achieved from this can be evident, ideally before and at the CBD COP, such that other banks can see that kind of opportunity that's out there and the sort of things that you've been doing, then I think that will be absolutely fantastic. You know, we'd love to see this rolling from the East Asia Flyway to, you know, other flyways globally, and frankly, operating in other realms too. So, you know, I think this approach is tremendous, and you know, great to build on the excellent work that you've already done. Thank you.
If I can just jump in, Bruce, and underscore that point. I think what we're trying to achieve here, and with ADB's leadership on this, is something quite unique. You know, just bringing in these different elements to sort of conserve the flyway, bringing in leadership that comes with the bank, sort of driving things, bringing in governments, bringing in civil society, bringing in academia, getting them to work in a way that they may not always be used to working in. getting that model right. I mean, this is going to be a huge example, not just for this flyway and Asia, but for the world. So, you know, it's really exciting to be part of this, both because we're doing some good conservation, but also because we're developing something which is going to be a model for the world as a whole. So very excited to be part of this, and thank you so much for, you know, bringing us all together to sort of to do this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you to everyone. I think it's through the inspiration and ideas that also we've been, you know, getting from you all in the conservation community, and the encouragement and support to take something like this forward. It helps give us the ambition. So we're really looking forward to working closely with you. The time-wise, I think we'll need to wrap up. I think some of us will need to, on the Asian side, probably wrap up, and it's probably getting late for many people as well. Let me just do a quick call though. Is there any, you know, really brief interventions anyone would like to make final words? Doug, or anyone, of course.
Bruce, I might make a quick comment if I may.
Mark, sure, yeah.
Just having come from a career of working in ecological conservation civil society organizations for most of my working life before joining ADB, I think I'm not coming across as too biased if I now give a quick plug to the development agency side, having been in this space for a few years. Just wanting to mention here, yes, it's terrific that ADB is here, that we're moving forward with this, but equally a shout out to the other development agencies. KFW has a huge biodiversity program across Asia. AFD has a specific biodiversity program and an internal rating system classifying the projects into biodiversity in terms of differing levels of involvement. So there's a great deal of work going on by other agencies, which is all very complementary, I think, to what we're doing here. So just wanting to add that comment about the other works. For everyone, at the beginning of this year in January, the National Development and Reform Commission of China and the Ministry of Finance of China invited multilateral development banks and bilaterals to a meeting, to a workshop in Beijing, specifically to talk about biodiversity conservation and how we can bring that into lending and non-lending products within the space of development agency support. So that was at the highest level of the government saying, we want to do more in this space. How do we do that? And I was very impressed to learn about what the World Bank is doing, what AFD is doing, what EIB and others are doing. So there's a lot going on there, I think, that we can build on in terms of bringing in our development partners into this new initiative. The Convention on Biological Diversity, for example, the Secretariat has just initiated a new working group on the role of MDBs and biodiversity conservation, particularly in biodiversity financing in the run-up to COP15. So this is another space where we see another opportunity for scaling up. Thank you. Over.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Yeah, look, thinking about this more also, I think the idea of putting together a coalition of partners to kind of take this forward, working very closely, and we can maybe spend a bit of time in sort of a maybe initially smaller group to formulate up some of the ideas, but I think very quickly we should convene maybe another meeting around the idea of a coalition, and with the various CSO, bilateral, multilateral partners to see who wants to take this forward with that collective spirit to try and move it, and with a kind of strong push between now and CBD, because that's definitely a stage that we can use to take it forward. And then the country outreach and regional initiatives outreach is going to be pretty critical as well to work up. So I think the idea of a roadmap and then a coalition would be something that we should put on the prioritization for the next steps. Okay, well, look, I think I'll need to draw us to a close, even though I'm sure that many of us could keep the conversation going for the rest of the day or the night. But I'm really looking forward to taking this up with everyone pretty soon, and I think the team will report back and then make some planning for the next steps. So that'll be something to look forward to. So once again, really appreciating everyone's time, and I'm pretty impressed, like even at this point, after quite many hours, we've still got 50 people on the call. So that really shows the, I think, the enthusiasm and excitement to take this forward. So that's fantastic. I think that's a success for today, that we've got a platform to move forward. So really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye then. Many thanks, Bruce, and the rest of the team at ADB and organizing.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Very exciting. And well done, Mark, particularly. You did a cracking job. And well done, everybody who put this together. I don't take much credit. Well done. Thank you.
It's been great. Very, yeah, really exceeded our expectations, actually. It's been terrific.
Thank you.
All smiles. That's good.
Well done, guys.
It starts now, though, yeah?
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, Patricia. Thank you so much.
Well done. Congrats,
Well
Mark. Duncan. Yeah, very good.
Thank you. Catch you later. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Yes.
Thanks very much, everyone. Very good, and look forward to catching up and supporting moving this forward.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks a lot, Doug, for the support. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug.
It's what we're here for.